Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back, Maverick family and new viewers, wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome. We have a couple of special guests tonight, regulars getting to be regulars here. First up, of course, our semi-regular co-host, Lori Spencer. Hello, welcome back.
Hi, guys. And good to see you again.
And I'll let you introduce the person you brought along for the ride tonight.
Well, it's our old friend, Caleb Maupin, RT reporter, spiritual father of CPI. I guess founder of CPI. Would that be the correct term for you, Caleb?
Sure. I am the founder.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, welcome back to Maverick News. It's always great to see you, my friend.
Always glad to be here.
I'm just sorry the circumstances aren't so good.
No, they are not.
Yeah, an important subject tonight, regardless of what your political views might be. We're going to be discussing what appears to be an assault on the First Amendment and free speech.
Absolutely. It's very troubling, no matter what your politics is. And I think that, Caleb, I should just give you the floor. I think you can explain this case better than anyone. For those who might be unaware, the Department of Justice handed down a very serious indictment this week against a Black activist socialist group called the UHURU Movement. And unfortunately, the story, once you unpack that, you don't have to be a socialist to look at this case and go, wait a minute, whoa, this puts, the First Amendment rights of every American citizen at risk. So, Caleb, I know you're expert level on this case. You know the UHURU Movement people personally. You've hosted them at CPI events. You had them there at the Summit Against Hypocrisy last month. So would you please explain to us what this case is all about and just kind of outline that for us?
Well, sure. I think you hit the nail on the head when you say you don't have to be a socialist to support these folks, because some of the main people speaking up in support of them are Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck and people like that. I was on Kim Iverson's program about it. And we're seeing a lot of conservatives looking at this case and saying, whoa, what's going on here? Meanwhile, a lot of the socialist crowd is silent because they are, somehow in line with the Biden administration. So it's a really weird situation because I've known about the UHURU movement for years. It was just, it used to be years ago, you would go to anti-war protests in Washington, D.C., New York City. There'd be all kinds of different communist groups there selling their newspaper, handing out leaflets, whatever. And one of the groups you would see was called the African People's Socialist Party. And they had a newspaper called Burning Spear. I used to buy the Burning Spear from them. I think when Gaddafi died, they published like Gaddafi's last testament. I remember reading that.
In the Burning Spear. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just one of these like small socialist groups. I understood it was a Black only organization, but then they have a separate group that's for white supporters. Right. And that's how it's set up. It's a group of like Black socialists. And then they have a white supporters organization of people who agree with them. And they've been around forever. I think
50 years, right?
At least, yeah. Their founder, Chairman O'Malley, he was a member of the Black Panthers at one point. He was a Black Panther. And I believe like back in the 50s, like in the Jim Crow years, there was like a racist billboard and he like splattered paint on it and, was put in jail for that and like did prison time. And, he was kind of just, a well-known Black activist who started his own organization. And so I knew about them and I never particularly, had much of an interaction for them. I remember in Philadelphia, I would go to protests supporting Mumia Abu-Jamal. They would always be there selling their newspaper and whatever. And it was just a group, right? I mean, that's all I really knew about them.
I knew a little about them because I've been in the anti-war movement for more than 30 years, and they were always there. At every major protest, they would have representatives there. And I didn't know much about them. I just knew they were really cool people. They're really
right.
nice.
I mean, they're just a group. You know what I mean? I mean, that's just what I knew them as. They're just, there's a whole alphabet soup of different parties. We know them by their acronyms: the RCP, the SWP, the ISO, the QWH, and the XYZ or whatever. I mean, it was just, there's all these different leftist groups. This is just one of the groups that I just knew about. And every so often I'd see them and whatever. So then about a week before our conference last August, my phone started blowing up one morning. Everyone was calling me, Caleb, did you hear what happened to the UHURU Movement, the African People's Socialist Party? And I was like, no, I didn't hear what happened, because nothing was on social media yet. But people are saying they stormed their offices, they pointed guns in their faces, they flew drones into their house.
Wasn't that raid in 2 cities on the same day or simultaneously?
Yes, St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida.
That's right.
They raided their homes in August, and I heard about this, and I was like, wow,
that's pretty big.
Yeah, and then later that day, one of their members gave a press conference, and then the FBI came out with an indictment against some Russian that they said they were connected to, some Russian guy they'd met with, and they said that's why we raided their homes. And so then they gave a press conference, and they said this is an unbelievable attack on our civil liberties, etc.
That press conference was fire. By the way, it's one of the best I've ever seen. I love it. Everybody should go watch that press conference.
Yeah. So, we were having our conference in Chicago, in a suburb of Chicago called Deerfield. So I called up their office and I said, we're the Center for Political Innovation. We agree with you on the Ukraine situation. We're also sympathetic to Russia. We'd like to see if some of your members can come to our conference and highlight what's just happened to you, because this is very terrifying. This is an attack on all Americans and their freedom of speech. And they said, okay. And a week after they got their homes raided, they sent 5 of their members to our conference in Chicago. We gave them a huge standing ovation, and we let them talk for quite some time. They gave a long presentation. They were kind of our guests of honor. I introduced them to Tara Reid, who's the victim of Joe Biden, who was also a speaker at our conference. Introduced them to Garland Nixon. He also, he's a radio host. He was speaking at our conference. That's what happened. So that happened. And they've been having meetings ever since then saying that we expect the government is going to indict us. And I looked at that and I thought, no, if they were named in the original indictment as unindicted co-conspirators, that means they're not going to indict them. If they were going to indict them, they would have done it already. They don't want to let them be prepared. I assumed that this indictment wouldn't happen.
DOJ took their time. Was it 8 months it took them to finally indict them?
Yeah. And now we find out, and there's been many meetings that they've been telling people we're going to be indicted. Our lawyers say we're going to be indicted. And there's been many people going to their meetings and talking about their case. And now last week, the indictments came down. They are formally indicted with acting as, I believe the charge is conspiracy to act as foreign agents of Russia.
I have the news release here. I think it's a news release from the Justice Department. I'll just throw it up on the screen here so you can at least see what we're talking about, folks.
It's scary stuff.
There it is.
I mean, when
US
you read
citizens
this,
and Russian intelligence officers charged with conspiring to use U.S. citizens as illegal agents of the Russian government. So what do you make of that, Caleb?
Well, the scary thing is, if you read the fine print there are so many things in this press release that are not crimes. Such as having a video conference call, having a Zoom meeting. That is not a crime. Like having an email. They said there was an email sent out about the Ukraine situation. Not a crime. They made
sowing
YouTube,
discord.
Yeah,
not a crime.
Sowing discord. They use that phrase over and over again. They were sowing discord.
Spreading Russian propaganda was one of the charges, which is, by the way, not a crime. We are not in a declared war with Russia. We are not under wartime censorship laws. That's not a crime. But they're being charged with this as though it's a felony.
Yeah, and I mean it's a very serious. They're facing up to 10 years in prison if convicted 4 people, 3 that are part of their organization, and then one guy who used to be part of their organization now has his own organization called the Black Hammer. But those 4 people, Chairman O'Malley, the founder of the African People's Socialist Party, Penny, what's her last name? Penny, who's a leader of their white supporters organization, Jesse Neville, who's a leader of their white supporters organization, and then this guy, Ghazi Kudzo, who's the leader of the Black Hammer organization. All 4 of them are facing up to 10 years in prison for speech, and when you look over this indictment, all the activities that they name as their supposed illegal activity are all constitutionally protected speech. They stated their opinion. They went to some meetings in Russia. They went on some Zoom calls. They sent out some emails. It's really horrifying. The only thing that they have in there that could possibly be considered as a crime, they allege that some of their local election campaigns that they ran in Florida
city council
somehow,
race, right?
Very city council race were somehow paid for by Russia or something like that.
Or the contributions were made to the candidate from the Russian government or something like that. But
something like
I don't even think that's a crime as long as you declare it. I think what this case is all about was a failure to fill out paperwork declaring that they were foreign agents or received foreign assistance.
I mean, the whole thing is absurd. The Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is this law that was passed in 1938. It is rarely enforced. I believe there have only been 5 prosecutions under it in its entire existence. When they train FBI people, they actually tell them in their training, this is not a law. We don't take this seriously. If there's an issue, we send people paperwork and make them register, but we don't take this seriously. It's a law that the language of which is so vague. I mean, it's like anyone who ever met with anybody or went to a foreign country, in theory, could be in violation of it. The way it's routinely enforced is if they think you're in violation, they send you, they serve you with notice that if you don't register within so many days, you might have a problem. And so then people register. They used this against RT, my employers.
That's right. They sure did.
They didn't arrest us. They just told us, if you don't register by a certain date, you will be arrested. And so we registered by that date. But if you read the forms that were filled out, I mean, RT America no longer exists, but the company, TNR Productions, they filled out the forms. And if you read the forms, the owner of RT America, TNR Productions, he actually wrote on the forms, he said, I am filling this out under duress. Because the thing was, he didn't think he was acting as a foreign agent. He thought he was facilitating media production. And he's filling out government forms. So if he writes false things on those forms, that's a crime. So if you read, he actually registered. You can read the forms on the Department of Justice website. He says, I am filling this out under duress. He's got legal advice as he's filling this out, because it's like he's basically being told to confess to a crime he hasn't committed in order to avoid being prosecuted. So he's writing on there. I mean, it's kind of scary to read, the writing on the forms. And but we were forced to register, right? And so we were forced to register. However, this group, they were not given an opportunity to register. They were not, served with notice that they were in violation or anything like that. They just had SWAT teams raid their homes, and now they're facing 10 years in prison for engaging in free speech. And the crazy thing is, these election campaigns that they ran, I mean, they got like 2% of the vote, right? They had no chance of winning. Right, at all. Like, it was symbolic. It was a symbolic campaign to make a political statement.
Well, yeah, I mean, Florida is not exactly crawling with socialists last time I checked.
Right, and
pretty conservative state.
Yeah, they had no chance of winning, and they ran as a third party just to make a statement. And the more you look into this case, it appears that what's going on is the Democrats don't like this organization. They have had it in for them for quite some time, because in 2008. This group, I remember seeing it on national television, live TV on CNN. This group, when Barack Obama went to St. Petersburg, Florida, and was speaking to this mostly black audience, they disrupted him. And they had a sign.
Yes. I remember that.
Yeah. Barack Obama, what about the black community? They called him out about the issue of police brutality and about the issue of the home foreclosure crisis. And they interrupted him. Some of them were escorted out. Some of them got up during the Q&A, and it made like a big incident.
That's when they got on the list.
Oh, you can be sure of that. That's when they got on the list. And they run in these elections in impoverished African American neighborhoods, St. Petersburg, Florida, where the Democrats just assume they're going to win every election. In a lot of areas like urban centers of the United States, they say the Democratic primary is the election. That's how it is in New York City. I live in Brooklyn, but the vote on actual election day is pretty meaningless because everybody knows there's no chance in hell the Republican's going to win. It's going to be a Democrat. So the real election is the Democratic primary. These Democrats in St. Petersburg, Florida, they assume that all the low-income black folks there will vote for them. Well, the UHURU Movement comes along, the African People's Socialist Party, and they put up posters and they say, well, vote for us. And the local Democrats don't appreciate that. And it appears to me that this is the Democratic Party trying to clear out their opponents and trying to weaken their opposition, and that they have built up a significant base. They do provide community services, on a community level. They run a farmer's market where they bring fresh food into these low-income black neighborhoods that are considered like food deserts, where you only have like junk food and gas stations and stuff. Well, they bring in fresh food, farmers markets. They also provide services to pregnant mothers and midwives and classes on eating healthy, and they provide a lot of services in these low-income black neighborhoods. And they run their own election campaigns criticizing the Democrats, saying the Democrats are not friends of black people. And it appears that the Biden administration wants to shut this down. And so they've decided to declare it a Russian conspiracy and drag these people into court and possibly imprison them.
But this has got to be very much connected to the war in Ukraine and their position on that too, right?
They make that very clear in this press release you've got on the screen. They say that they falsely claim anyone supporting Ukraine is supporting Nazis, which actually there are plenty of Nazi sympathizers in the Ukrainian military and forces. That's not falsely. And yes, even if they said that, if they believed it to be true, that's not a crime. Right. But they list that as one of their crimes. They list them, stating pro-Russian positions as their crimes, and the fact that they are very outspoken in their support of Russia in the conflict in Ukraine. They take Russia's position. They see Russia as a force resisting colonialism. That's the language that they would use. And because of that, they seem to be targeted here. They're on the wrong side of the State Department and U.S. foreign policy. On top of that, they're on the wrong side of the Democratic Party. And so now, in the name of stopping, quote unquote, election interference, keeping the ever debunked nothing burger of Russiagate alive, they've decided to charge these people. This is a very serious situation.
So what happens from here? Have you checked to see if anyone's been arrested or in jail, or what's the status with these folks?
Well, they're not in custody currently. They are no longer in custody, and they plan to go to trial and defend themselves in court. They've decided to refrain from public statements at this time because they don't want to prejudice their case or say anything that could be used against them. They are preparing a defense, and they have attorneys who will show that they are not Russian agents by any means. They've been doing this for well over 50 years. They've been spreading their message and explaining and putting forward their viewpoint. On top of that, they will show their election campaigns were, completely legal election campaigns that they ran and they've been running for many decades. And they will show that them going to a conference is not illegal. Them, having Zoom conferences and web conferences is not illegal, and they're prepared to defend themselves in a court of law. But it looks like it's going to be in the Florida district of federal court. They are going to be charged, and facing federal charges. They plan to take it to trial and basically say, look, we have committed no crime here. All the charges against us are just that we exercised our rights under the First Amendment. You don't have to agree with us or like what we say, but we have the right to say it. This is a big case. This is a really big deal. And if they are convicted, this opens the door to jailing all kinds of people. I mean, they could jail Tucker Carlson for this. They could jail Max Blumenthal for this. They could jail all kinds of people. I mean, this opens the door. If they say that things you say, statements you make on social media or in interviews or in web conferences, if they say that that constitutes, being a foreign agent, at that point, the ability, the freedom of Americans to speak and put forward an understanding of events that is contrary to mainstream media and U.S. foreign policy becomes illegal. And that's a really, really scary situation.
This has almost a McCarthy type feel to it, really.
Well, it does. And this phrase they use, sowing discord, that's not a crime. The way free speech works is you're allowed to say what you say, even if it makes somebody mad, right? And I mean, all media sows discord. That's what media thrives on, is controversy. Any candidate who runs for office is going to have to criticize the other candidate, have discord. I mean
Donald Trump sowed a lot of discord. Are they going to charge him?
Yeah, I mean, sowing discord is not a crime. I mean, it's really, really horrifying to take a look at the details of this case. And
we're all going to jail. Everybody in our chat room that's like, well, y'all are Canadians, a lot of you, so I guess it might not affect Rick, but Caleb, you and me, see you in prison, buddy. We're going to be
it could affect me. I mean, even if I go to cross the border, which I used to do quite often, not since the pandemic, but if
we've interviewed Russian officials on this show, and many people in Russia who strongly support Russia. Maybe they're Russian propagandists, but so what? That's not illegal.
Right.
It shouldn't be.
That's what Tucker Carlson said on his show. He said, you can espouse Russian propaganda or Ukrainian propaganda or American propaganda if you want, right? I mean,
exactly. You hit it. What about all these people who spread pro-Ukrainian propaganda in the mainstream media 24/7? They're getting money from somewhere too. They work on behalf of Ukraine's interests. That's not illegal. So fair is fair.
Yeah, I mean, in the Foreign Agents Registration Act, they did use this to threaten some of Trump's associates, if I remember correctly. I can't remember their names, but there were a couple of Trump's associates who they tried to claim were illegally lobbying for political parties in Ukraine or something like that. They did use that.
Giuliani was one of them.
Yeah, I think they used it against Giuliani.
Case.
Yeah. But it didn't go to trial because there were plea bargains and agreements were made, and so they that they didn't contest it. But this has huge constitutional implications. I mean, what does it mean to be a foreign agent? What does it mean to be a foreign lobbyist? And the law has a specific exception for media outlets. But yet they ruled that didn't apply when it came to RT, when it came to Sputnik Radio. They forced us to register, even though there's a special exception for media outlets. So at this point, I mean, we're just going to have to see how this plays out. You can tell that among the elite, there is a really big division over this. I mean, what Elon Musk recently did with Twitter, where he removed the he put state-affiliated media on NPR. NPR then left Twitter and all of that. And then they removed state-affiliated media from everybody. And that was a political statement. That was them saying, you want us to apply this fairly, or should we just not do it at all? I mean, that was what was going on there.
Ultimately, do you think that was the right move, to just remove all those labels?
Well, the thing is that U.S. state-affiliated media, and this is where it gets really complicated, all right? So it used to be that it was illegal in the United States, within U.S. borders, to broadcast anything that was paid for by the government. So Voice of America would only broadcast outside the United States.
That's right.
Because there was this fear that, the U.S. government would set up a propaganda outlet. But there's this loophole. There's this loophole that they had, right? For like NPR, PBS, they get government funding, but they're private companies, right? They're private companies who just get a grant from the government, and they also get grants from the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller think tanks and whoever, right? ExxonMobil and whatever. If you watch PBS, it's like, this program is brought to you by, right? So they're technically not government media, even though they get government funding, right? It's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, National Public Radio, whatever. That's their loophole.
And in reality, only a small portion of their annual budget comes from the government. It's a pretty small grant compared to the other money, which you're right. Most of it comes from corporations and big foundations.
Come to Canada.
Yeah, baby.
Everybody's on the take. Every mainstream media outlet gets money now, millions. And the CBC on Twitter, now that they were labeled a government-funded broadcaster, and then they
left, right?
Well, yeah, they
Protest?
said we're not going to play on Twitter anymore, and now they've Elon Musk went okay, so now they're labeled as 69% government funded.
Oh,
What's your
boy.
ranking on the fundometer for RT?
Well, right. And, I mean, it gets weird. So the thing is, though, Russia, they do have just like the United States, there's Voice of America. There's also something called Voice of Russia that exists, right? And Voice of Russia was registered as a foreign outlet, and it was just like a radio station. They had like a guy in DC, but it was radio broadcast out of Moscow. You can listen to it on shortwave radio. That's Voice of Russia, the equivalent of Voice of America. Voice of America is American government propaganda. Voice of Russia was considered to be the same thing. But then, RT, though, is just like NPR in that it's a private company in Russia, RIA Novosti. And I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but it's a private company. Does that company receive some government funding? I would assume so. But again, so does NPR. So does CBC, right? And but at that point, BBC, for example, is also a private corporation primarily funded by the British government. So the way the law was worded was if you were like BBC or if you were like NPR, you were not considered government media of a foreign country. So then you didn't have to register. But then they decided, well, that doesn't apply in the case of RT. But because RT gets some funding or whatever, or because we've published all these reports, which some of the reports they published about RT are hilarious. They get things so blatantly wrong. And
lies.
Well, like one of the reports they published, it was a State Department report on RT. It said that RT was clearly trying to, sow discord and cause chaos in America because they hosted a debate of the Libertarian Party.
That's right.
And they hosted a debate of the Green Party. So clearly that's the case. What they didn't mention
troublemakers.
is that CNN that year did a town hall with Jill Stein of the Green Party and did a town hall with the Libertarian candidate, Johnson. So I guess CNN is also a foreign asset, trying to sow. I mean,
CNN sows more discord in this country than probably any other media outlet.
Well, exactly. And what was so wild was I remember when I first heard about the indictments and I was at the gym, I was exercising, and I'm looking at my TV and they're talking about that case where it was a really tragic case of this young African-American man who opened the door or went to the wrong door in a neighborhood and someone was scared and shot him. Right. And I'm watching CNN and MSNBC talking about this case. And the way they're talking about it is far more intended to incite discord than the way the UHURU Movement talks. The UHURU Movement, they talk about unity through reparations, meaning that they believe white people owe reparations to black people for slavery. They collect those reparations and they use them to set up services in the black community. And I'm watching, that their whole thing is we should all come together. We should talk about how racism is a stain on all of U.S. society. Unity through reparations. That's what they're talking about. But I'm watching CNN and MSNBC, the way they're talking about this young man who was shot. I guess he wasn't killed, but he was shot. The way they're talking about it, it's like, oh my God, all these right-wing Americans, they have guns and they're being told paranoid things by Fox News. And we got to take their guns away because they're so dangerous because of all the right-wing things they hear. And this right-wing media has got to be silenced because it's making Americans paranoid. It's like they're, imagine, is that a message that's going to bring Americans together? There's this group of people that are paranoid and dangerous, and we have to take their firearms away. We have to revoke their constitutional right to own guns. And on top of that, we need to ban their media because it makes them crazy, violent. I mean, you watch this. I'm watching the way they're reacting to this. They're like trying to stoke up a civil war. If you outlaw Fox News or you confiscate the firearms of conservatives, you are going to have a civil war on your hands, right? Whereas the UHURU Movement is saying, hey, could you give us some money to set up a farmer's market? I mean, who's sowing discord, for goodness sakes? It's wild. It's wild to watch, I mean, I feel like, yeah, it really is. And I feel like, everybody with any common sense needs to be speaking up for the UHURU Movement right now. Anybody. I mean, the fact that Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson have spoken up already, Glenn Greenwald is all over this, Max Blumenthal, anybody with any sense of free speech constitutionality needs to just raise from the heavens about how outrageous this is. The Department of Justice needs to drop the charges and apologize, for goodness sakes. I mean, what in the world is their case going to be based on? I mean, are they just going to have like statements that they've made?
Where's the evidence? I know. I was thinking the same thing when I read the actual indictment this week, and I'm like, where's the beef? I mean, you have no case, DOJ. This is even weaker than the case against Julian Assange, which is very weak in my opinion. I don't think they have poop. They ain't got a case. And so this thing, though, I can't find a crime in there with a fine-tooth comb. I just see it's the most insane thing I've seen the Biden administration do yet. And boy, that's really saying something because they've done some crazy shit. But this is really off the charts, really dangerous.
Is the most substantive thing the allegations of funding for candidates in that local election? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's the most substantive thing that I read in that. And that, yeah, if you are running for office in a real election, there are laws about any foreign donations you receive. So, but then from what I understand from people that have been attending their webinars and stuff, their attorneys are overwhelmingly prepared to show in court that they did not receive any foreign money for their election campaign. So that'll be debunked. And, this notion that their election campaign was somehow directed from Russia, that's absurd because they've been running campaigns like this for decades. Since the 70s, they've been running these kind of local election campaigns. Their slogans have been the same since the 70s: unity through reparations, black power, black empowerment. So the idea that their election campaign was somehow a foreign Russian plot or something, that's absurd. Now, I understand there are some other groups that were named in the indictment that have not yet been indicted. One of them is a California independence organization that they indicted, or they haven't indicted them, but they have mentioned that they've accused this Russian guy Ianov of giving money to this California independence group, and that they've alleged that they are foreign agents. Also, they haven't indicted them at this point.
Interesting.
And I think there were some other groups that were mentioned also, and I can't remember who the other groups were, but there had this conference they went to in Russia that's put on by a guy named Ianov. And from what I understand, if I'm not mistaken, he's a basketball player. He was like a professional basketball player in Russia. He really likes Black Americans and rap music and stuff like that. And, he's kind of a wealthy Russian who's a basketball player. And he started a nonprofit called the Anti-Globalization Movement in Russia. And he would invite different people from around the world, from Latin America, from Asia, and from Africa, to come speak at his conferences and talk about opposing globalization. And he invited conservatives, and leftists and other kinds of people, invited them to his conference to speak about opposing globalization, to kind of put forward their perspective. It was a wide variety of different voices. And these were like fancy conferences in Russia, fancy hotels, fancy video production teams filming them and such. And many, many different American organizations took up the opportunity. It's like, hey, you're going to fly us to Russia to give a presentation, why not? And this is the thing is the Americans do this all the time too. What do you think Biden's Summit for Democracy was? They flew in people from every corner of the world to talk about how they're doing human rights activism paid for by George Soros and the CIA. There are conferences in New York City and in Washington, D.C. and Chicago all the time with people flown in from some different country where the USA wants to stage a protest movement and bring down the government or something. And
talk about sowing discord.
Yeah, this is something the United States does all the time, is they have conferences where they bring people from different countries to come forward with their perspective. Who do you think Epoch Times are? The Epoch Times is everywhere. That's a group of people that were sowing discord all over China, to the point that kids were getting kidnapped and, calling their parents on the phone saying, I want to leave. I want to get protected. And they couldn't do that, intersections were being blocked for hours as the Falun Gong people were doing their exercises in the middle of the street. And in the 1990s, the Chinese government cracked down on them and they said, we're going to crack down on this religious movement. And the leader of them fled and now lives in Queens. And they run the Epoch Times newspaper, which is a big part of the Trump movement. And they're openly trying to violently overthrow the Chinese government. And they are this religious group that is notoriously anti-gay. Some of them want to execute all gay people. Some of them just want public castration of all homosexuals. There's a debate.
Holy cow, I didn't know that.
debate. They also believe that anyone who has an interracial parents, then you don't have a soul, right? You have to have people of the same race have to produce you in order for you to have a soul. So those of us who have interracial parents have no soul. This is a fanatical organization.
That's the Epoch Times. I haven't seen anything like that from them. I'll have to look that
I honestly
stuff up.
did not know that.
Yeah, well, they save that for their Chinese members. For the white people, they're just an exercise society. They're just a spiritual group, a religion in China that has beliefs, and they've been so persecuted, and and they support Trump because Trump wants to fight evil China that's persecuting them. But for their Chinese members, they have a very nationalistic and very, very traditionalist authoritarian message, that is very, very anti-gay, very racially separatist oriented. And they argue, one of their big arguments is, I guess they're Buddhists, and their beliefs are like they're a specific interpretation of Buddhism. And they argue that when the communists came to power in China, when they gave women the right to vote, that was one of the biggest signs that China was heading towards what they called a Dharma ending period, like a disastrous period, because women should not be voting. Women, should be submissive to men. That's one of their big beliefs. That's one of their big beefs against the Chinese Communist Party. They're not democracy activists, which is how they like to present themselves. They are fanatical, fundamentalist Buddhists with a very...
It doesn't sound very democratic to me.
No, they're feudal. They're advocates of feudalism. They glorify feudalism. And that's the Epoch Times. And that, they started a newspaper, I guess in the 80s. Some of their members started a newspaper in their basement, and one thing led to another. And it was when in New York City, they started putting a China Daily newspaper on all the newsstands, because China Daily is like an English language newspaper funded by China. And it was, you read it, it was kind of encouraging Americans to invest in China, reporting on U.S.-China relations from a pro-China perspective. And so once that was available, and it cost 25 cents, it was on all the newsstands in New York City. Suddenly, Epoch Times had a grant, and they had money to get their newspaper everywhere, and it was available, and it was free for a while. It's not free anymore, but it used to be completely free. They had these just boxes everywhere. You could get the Epoch Times for free, and that was pretty clear. That was intended to be like the rebuttal to China Daily. Once China Daily was available, then they had Epoch Times. But I remember when Epoch Times were liberals. That's what I remember during the Obama years. Yeah, because they're hippies, they're mystical Asian Buddhists that do exercise and all of that. And I remember Epoch Times, the front page would always be like Black Lives Matter and no kidding. Yeah, I remember they were liberals. And then when Trump won, at first they didn't like him. They ran articles that were criticizing Donald Trump, comparing him to the Chinese communists, saying he's an authoritarian. But then about a year, maybe even a year and a half into Trump's administration, Trump made it clear he was going to jump on the anti-China thing. And then all of a sudden, at all the Trump rallies around the country, Epoch Times, their members would be inside the events, giving free copies of their paper to every person who attended. And all of a sudden, they were for Donald Trump. They were a pro-Trump paper. And that's Epoch Times. It's a very interesting thing. What I also find, this is directly related to me, they have a guy who writes for them named Trevor Loudon, who's a New Zealander, and that guy is obsessed with me. He name drops me in all kinds of columns, and he gets all kinds of information about me hilariously wrong. I love Trevor Loudon. They're paying him to write these articles like stalking American communists, and so he always finds a way to fit me into every article, and he gets things hilariously wrong. I love that guy. God bless you, Trevor Loudon. God bless you.
Thanks for the laughs, Trevor.
Yeah, he went on Roger Stone's podcast a couple months ago, and he said that I was a big influence on Tulsi Gabbard. I love that. I play that clip on my show like every opportunity.
What a compliment.
Yeah, I know. He says Caleb Maupin and the Center for Political Innovation. And the Center for Political Innovation are a huge influence on Tulsi Gabbard. They are promoting Russia and North Korea. It's awesome. I love that guy. So, I will give them credit. I will thank them for putting my name in print and saying I'm a member of groups I'm not a member of. At one point, they said I was part of a group called the League of Revolutionaries for New America. I've never had anything to do with that organization. I actually sent them an email and said, guys, I said, guys, just so you know, it's in this newspaper that I'm a member of your group, but I'm not a member of your group. I'm not pretending to be a member of your group. I had to send them like a goodwill email to make sure they understood. I'm not out there pretending to be a member of your organization, but it's Yeah, Trevor Loudon, and they hire him to write these crazy, because it fits the message. He's one of these kind of obsessive anti-communists, and it fits the message that like China is taking over America, the Democrats are all communists or whatever. So they pay him to write these articles in the Epoch Times. But you want to talk about foreign lobbying? We have like a foreign religious group that runs a huge newspaper all across America. If anyone should have to register, how about them? Why don't they register as foreign lobbyists to overthrow the Chinese government?
Maybe because their funding is coming from the CIA.
I would think so. Yes,
I
and
would
probably
too.
lots of other rich people that they've recruited in New York City who love to go to their exercise and meditation workshops and such. They're good at that apparently. But there you go. Yeah, that's the Epoch Times.
So in this release here, it says, additionally, in a separate case out of the District of Columbia, a criminal complaint was unsealed charging Russian national Natalia Berlinova with conspiring with an FSB officer to act as an illegal agent of Russia in the United States. And then there's a quote from Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olson of the Justice Department's National Security Division, where he says Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service allegedly weaponized our First Amendment rights, freedoms. Russia denies its own citizens to divide Americans and interfere in elections in the United States. The department will not hesitate to expose and prosecute those who sow discord and corrupt U.S. elections in service of hostile foreign interests, regardless of whether the culprits are U.S. citizens or foreign individuals abroad. Have you had a chance to sort of digest the direct Russian connection there?
Well, the crazy thing about that is it's not even that she was acting as a foreign agent. It's that she was conspiring to act as a foreign agent. And that's one thing at the federal level they will do when they charge people. They don't have to actually show any crime. They just have to show you talked to somebody about maybe hypothetically committing a crime. And that's conspiracy. And those conspiracy charges are insane because no crime has to actually have taken place. You just have to have talked about it, right? That's what they got Victor Bout for. Victor Bout, who I interviewed from prison. I interviewed him, a Russian. He was traded for the basketball player, Brittany Griner. And so he finally got to see his family after decades in prison. But when I interviewed him about his case, he said, yeah, it was bullshit. You know, two guys met with me, you know, and they showed up and they were FBI agents, but they claimed to be somebody else. And it was like, could you possibly maybe sell us weapons? And he didn't give a clear answer. He just said, well, I don't know who you are. Maybe something like that. Boom, they got him. And
total setup.
Yeah, it was a total setup. And he didn't commit any actual crime. And the wild thing about that particular case was that, you know, they tend to scare the jury. And that's what they're probably going to do in this case with UHURU. They're just going to scare the jurors. Like, oh, my God, this person, sure, they didn't commit a crime this time. But if you don't lock them up when they get out, they're going to do something. Aren't you afraid? And they're probably going to show them all kinds of war porn from Ukraine. You know,
and what could be scarier than a bunch of, you know, radical militant black socialists to a white jury in Florida?
Well, right. And they're going to show them a lot of like scary videos in Ukraine and, oh, this could happen. This could be happening in our neighborhood if we don't stop the you know, and that's going to be their message. And it's
scary
disturbing.
Thing is it might work.
Yeah, I mean, it might. And I mean, you know, I mean, look at the data. I mean, you know, acquittals in federal court are extremely rare. Acquittals in any court in the United States are very rare. You know, very few cases in the United States go to trial. You know, it's like less than 1% actually go to trial. A number of attorneys I've spoken to over the years have said to me that if a case actually goes to trial in state court or federal court, something's wrong because it shouldn't go to trial. They do everything they can to prevent going to trial because it's very expensive. You know, they have to pay all those attorneys and pay all the people and all of that. And then there's, you know, people know that there's this thing called the trial penalty, which is that if you actually go to trial, they're going to give you a way bigger sentence if you're convicted. But then, despite the fact that so few cases actually go to, you know, to trial, the conviction rate is like 90%. I mean, it's like, you know, if you go on trial in the United States, it's a safe bet you're going to be convicted. The chances of you not being convicted are very, very slim.
Federal court, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Anything national security related, yeah, you're toast.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a few cases where there have been situations where it was so blatantly obvious that the people hadn't done anything wrong. I think there was I remember there was the Fort Hood case. That was a case where it was like like I believe what had happened was an FBI agent had walked into a room with some African-American folks who converted to Islam and handed them slips of paper with something in a foreign language they didn't understand and said to everybody, read this out loud. And so they just kind of read what they thought were nonsense words out loud. And they were actually like swearing an oath to join Al-Qaeda. And they arrested them for that and tried to say they were conspiring to attack a fort or something. And then in court, they were just able to show they had no intention of ever committing a crime or anything like that. And so they were acquitted. You know, and there were some other cases. I believe what was her name? The Pulse nightclub shooter. His wife was acquitted in court, I believe, in federal court, wasn't she? They tried to charge her as an accomplice in that shooting, and then, you know, and then they were able to acquit her. So it does happen. It's not completely unheard of, but for anything to go to trial is a very strange case. And that's why it's so scary that the conviction rate is so high, because people wouldn't go to trial if they weren't like adamant they were innocent or something like that. You know, it's so much of a risk and so much of a cost. And that's the scary thing, is like, you know, even if they are acquitted, they're going to spend at least the next 2 years going into court for court appearances in court. I mean, it's going to be at least, you know, federal trials. You're talking 2 years.
These drag on for years.
Yeah. And that's, you know, they're going to be missing work. They're not going to be going to work. They're going to be running up lawyer bills and expenses. And so even if they don't, you know, end up convicting them, they're going to be, you know, this is going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. 2 years of their lives is going to be spent with the fear of going to prison hanging over their heads.
And that in itself is a kind of punishment.
Yeah.
Just to have to fight the government this way and all the money you have to spend in your own defense, even if they don't go to prison, that's almost like a form of prison. It takes over your entire life. It's going to ruin their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's vicious what they are doing. It's absolutely vicious and criminal. And every free speech organization should be all over this. The ACLU should be all over this. Every civil liberties oriented organization should be speaking up on their behalf right now. And
Libertarian Party.
Yeah, these people should be considered national heroes, you know, for enduring this, for refusing to back down. And you can be sure they were probably offered every, you know, I mean, before they do this, they said to them, you know, there were meetings with their attorneys, and they probably said to them beforehand, oh, well, if you'll apologize for meeting with the Russians and then start denouncing them and say you were duped, and we can use that to make propaganda against Russia, we'll drop the charges. They always make offers like that. That's how they are.
I don't think UHURU is going to bite.
Oh, they would never take that. And
no,
you know,
no,
but you can be sure. You can be sure they were intimidating them and trying to give them an out like this, because, you know, this is a lot of money that they're spending. You know, a lot of money that they're spending. You know, Victor Boot, who I interviewed, they wanted him to present dirt on Putin. That's what they were offering him. They said, if you'll get up and spread lies about Vladimir Putin, we can arrange for your whole family to come to the United States, and we'll drop the charges and you can just stay here for the rest of your life. And he said, well, I don't have any dirt on Putin, and I'm not going to get up and tell lies. You know, and so he spent years in prison. So there you go. I mean, this is the ruthless game that these prosecutors play.
It is ruthless. It's absolutely ruthless. And I've seen this happen time and time again in the United States, particularly in federal matters, where I've seen people falsely accused of terrorism charges, et cetera, during the war on terror. But this indictment tops anything I've honestly ever seen in my lifetime. This gets back to like the World War I era, when they were locking up Eugene Debs and socialists and deporting socialists and communists. This is Cold War stuff on steroids, and it's terrifying.
Yeah. You know, right after Barack Obama got elected in Chicago, the homes of some communists in the Freedom Road Socialist Organization were raided by the FBI, alleging they had ties to Palestinians. And they expected they would be indicted for funding terrorism or something like that. But no indictment ever came of that. They were all subpoenaed to go before a grand jury, and they all refused to, you know, go to the grand jury. And they expected that they would imprison them for contempt of a grand jury, and they didn't imprison them. They just kind of dropped it. But they intimidated the Freedom Road Socialist Organization quite a bit when Barack Obama was first elected. But they never charged them. And that was very strange. I believe there were also some anarchists in Portland during the Obama years who ended up getting called before a grand jury, not testifying against their friends or whatever, and then being, you know, imprisoned for like 8 months or something like that. And if I remember correctly, one of the head Weather Underground people, Bernadine Dorn, she was called before a grand jury. She refused to name names or whatever, and they did imprison her for 8 months for contempt of a grand jury. So, and she lost her law license. She wasn't able to practice law, but like the Weathermen actually committed bombings. So, there's, that's a little bit different.
They made no bones about it, and they didn't deny that they done it.
Yeah. So that's a little bit different.
Is there sort of an ongoing effort, or do you think that the DOJ will point to media reports or negative reports, try sort of portraying this group in a negative light? In Canada, I think the Canadian arm of this organization, some of those members have been involved with BLM. They're a socialist organization with Marxist ideology. So of course they would have some affiliation at some point and crossover, dovetailing with other groups on the left. But I don't know if they're necessary. Would you consider them woke?
I don't know. Their view is not mine. I will say this. In the past, I've had arguments with them because their view very much is that white people are the beneficiaries of imperialism, right? And that is their argument, that white Americans benefit from imperialism. And they argue that white Americans should be appealed to on kind of a guilt basis. Like, you've benefited from being white, from living in the imperialist homeland, so you owe reparations to black people. And that's not how I feel we should approach the working class of the United States. I don't view, people with hungry stomachs in Appalachia. I don't view people in, Midwestern communities that have had all the jobs taken away. I don't view the guys from Texas who get shot in Afghanistan. I don't view them as the oppressors, right? But this is a difference in perspective. And, it's based on the fact that, this is the question of the aristocracy of labor. Lenin wrote about this. There is a benefit to living in the center of Western capitalism. There is, right? And we have a higher living standard. Now, things have obviously changed over the years and living standards have dropped, but there is a benefit to living here. So how do you square that hole, right? That people in the third world have it a lot worse than we do. And how do you square that hole? That's a fair question. Why and that benefit, that boost, that higher living standard we've had here has been the basis for Americans, largely, especially white Americans, supporting the wars and things like that. So they're not wrong in what they're getting at. I don't personally, the Center for Political Innovation, we don't practice their approach about this, right? But at the same time, I don't see them as woke because their approach is not hostile. I don't see them, saying that conservative Americans are all Nazis who need to be killed. I don't hear them saying that.
No,
if anything, I see
haven't
a
heard
willingness
anything like that from them.
Yeah, and in fact, I hear a willingness to talk to conservatives, and the fact that right after they got raided, we called them up, a group with a very different perspective. We waved the American flag at our conferences, and and all that. They had no problem. They've come to 3 of our different events now and spoken. In fact, they're comfortable being seen with us and associating with us when we have a patriotic perspective. And that makes me think I wouldn't consider them to be woke. They're trying to build unity with what they're doing. They may have a perspective that is oriented toward the liberation of black people specifically. They may have a different perspective toward the white working class and how it relates to the black movement, et cetera. But I don't see them as hostile. I don't see them as woke.
I don't think they're hostile to white people.
Yeah.
I'm going to be blind for the rest of the show because look, my glasses just broke.
Oh my!
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Damn it! Just snapped right off. So I'll be like, I can't see.
So Caleb, we're sitting here. We're trying to defend their right to speak freely, but what is their position on free speech? Say, at some point in the future, they were to gain some degree of political power, would they defend others' right to free speech, or do you even know?
I don't know. And honestly, I just don't know enough about their organization. I would assume that they would. I will say I do know that they consider all black people in the world to be one nationality, right? They consider black Africans in Africa, the Caribbean folks, and African Americans, black people in Canada to all be one nationality. And they want to create kind of one network of territories, like one government for all the black people of the world. That would be separate. I believe that is what they aspire to do, if I understand correctly.
Which is very interesting, by the way. I don't dismiss that as crazy. I think that's always been a big thing in the radical black movement, and they've got a point.
Yeah, well, there's a history of this. You know, the Black Belt is a region in the United States it goes from Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. It's like an area, and it's where the most slave plantations were during slavery, because the soil there is black, and it's very rich soil. It's good for growing crops. And that region, the Black Belt region, even today is the highest concentration of African Americans of anywhere in the country. It's overwhelmingly black. People talk about the rural South. We think, I'm here in New York City. We think of black people as being urban, right? We think of Harlem or Brooklyn.
You need to come to the Mississippi Delta, my friend.
Yeah, but
show you around.
Yeah, the rural South, you'd have overwhelmingly African American areas. And during the 1930s, the Communist Party put forward the position that the Black Belt region of the United States was a colony of the United States. And they advocated the right of that area, the Black Belt, to secede from the United States, to form its own country. And they even had election campaign posters, that would have the map of where, it said self-determination for the Black Belt. And that was a long time position that the communists advocated.
It took guts to do that in the South 50 years ago.
It did. And people have wondered, because, they didn't exactly clarify what that meant. It was just kind of that, this overwhelmingly black area of the United States is exploited. The people there, are being deprived. They're producing so much wealth in terms of the crops, but they're not getting the wealth. But some people have even argued that wasn't necessarily meaning that government would be 100% black. It would be, if there were white people there too, they could be part of it, right? It was just that region that they argued was super exploited. And then during the 1950s, the Communist Party dropped that position. And they said, we no longer advocate that. But the Maoists, the people that were aligned with China, they continued to advocate that. And that's why, Malcolm X was very friendly with a lot of Maoist communists, because they continued to call for the Black Belt. Black Belt separatism. And then there were a number of black organizations that saw the communists and Stalin and others advocating independence for the Black Belt. And they started adopting it. The Nation of Islam called for independence for the Black Belt, for a black national territory. The Black Panthers called for that. And there was a group called the Republic of New Africa that was formed at one point in the 1960s and 70s. It was like a black communist organization, and they called for that as well. So there's a whole history of these kind of, positions that people take. And, it's a little bit different. The position that I've always taken as a communist is that if the black people in that region wanted that, if black Americans in general or the black people of that region wanted to break away from the United States and form a separate country, I would support their right to do so, right? But I don't advocate that, because coming from a white guy, that sounds like segregation, right? And
it also sounds like how the Civil War started. And
right.
If it wasn't okay for white folks to break away from the Union, would it be logical for it be okay for black folks to break away from the Union? It's an interesting argument.
Right. Again, if the black community in its majority was overwhelmingly saying that that's what they wanted, I would respect their right for that position. I don't see that among black Americans. Most black Americans don't consider themselves to be black nationalists. It's a much bigger percentage than you would think, though. Right. I mean, and white people underestimate that. But Minister Louis Farrakhan is widely respected in the black community. Other black nationalist groups like the UHURU Movement, have roots, and that black nationalism is a big current. And there's many different wings of it. Have you ever heard of the Black Hebrew Israelites, for example?
Yes. And, those groups have always historically been targeted by the government. But this harkens back to the old J. Edgar Hoover days. And, I was not expecting this in the 21st century. It's like we're just rolling backwards in time to the Cold War, to the McCarthy era, to the J. Edgar Hoover era, especially of persecuting any kind of civil rights movement, Black Power movement, radical socialist groups. That's always been defined an enemy of the U.S. government. And yet what sickens me is that these woke Democrats, and this is a Democratic administration that loves to pay lip service to how much they love black people, right? Doesn't Biden brag that he hired more black people into his administration than any other in history?
Yeah.
He really loves black folks, doesn't he?
Well, that's what's so wild about this, is that this wasn't Trump who did this. If Trump did this, they'd all be screaming from the heavens.
They'd be losing their minds.
MSNBC.
Yep.
But
That's
now,
right.
because Biden did it, it's not even worth mentioning. And the people that are coming to their aid are the conservatives. who see that this could be used against them. And they see what's happening with Trump, right now. They see what's happened to a number of conservatives right now. And they say this sets a dangerous precedent. So we're going to have to see how this case plays out. My, Center for Political Innovation, we're going to be all over this. We are going to be all over this. Because this is huge and it's not getting the mainstream coverage it deserves. I'll tell you that much. I'm glad Tucker Carlson covered it, but I feel like the reason it's not being covered is it's indefensible. MSNBC and CNN have decided their mission is to defend Joe Biden, and there's no defense here, especially in the light of their woke. Oh, we love black people. We're so anti-racist. There's no defense of this. There's absolutely no defense of this.
One thing I loved when Tucker did that segment the other night, which was priceless. He played some older footage of Chairman O'Malley. And I've been following O'Malley for years because he's just such an interesting cat. And Tucker was like, I don't know the first thing about this guy. I probably don't even agree with this guy, but I like this guy.
Right.
There's something about Chairman O'Malley, which is why he's such a powerful leader.
Yeah.
And there was a Zoom meeting yesterday of the Hands Off UHURU group, and they were fundraising, of course, for the Legal Defense Fund. They raised $20,000 yesterday.
Good.
It's amazing, and they're going to need it, and they're going to need a lot more because this is a David versus Goliath battle. When you have to fight the federal government, they're going to do all that they can to break you financially, and I have a feeling this group doesn't have that much money. So
yeah, I sent them a big donation, and many members of CPI have done so. Many friends of CPI. Everyone, this should be a focal point. This should be a central focus right now, defending them. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. All right. Well, it was good to talk to you both. I hope you continue to have a great show. My best wishes.
Did you want to play that video you sent?
Oh, sure, we can do that.
If you're
sure,
not
yeah. Well, I didn't know if we were where the conversation might go. I did send you some video from our kind of speak out in front of the White House opposing the Summit for Democracy. Go ahead and show it. You can show it. Yeah.
You got that on your
Hang
end,
on,
Rick?
I'll get it all set up here.
Get her done.
Yeah.
This is really cool, guys. I hope Joe Biden was home. Was he home that day?
I don't think so. I don't think he was.
Because Joe Biden is going to have a war propaganda show next week. He's calling it a summit for democracy, but we're here to expose it for what it really is, which is a summit of hypocrisy. And we are having our summit against hypocrisy. Joe Biden's war propaganda show about demonizing Russia, demonizing China, demonizing Venezuela, demonizing Cuba, demonizing Iran, and speaking in the name of democracy, when at the very same time they're suppressing our civil liberties over here. They're censoring us on social media. They're empowering the FBI to spy on us. They're violating our civil liberties. They're suppressing third parties. And he wants to lecture the world on democracy. Well, we're here to say we don't want a war propaganda show. We don't want the Summit for Democracy. We're here to oppose the drive toward war. We need jobs and schools and healthcare and education here in the United States of America. We don't need a war propaganda show. They're spending all this money to fly in leaders from around the world to publicize this war propaganda show to build the case. Our enemies aren't in Venezuela. Our enemies aren't in Iran. Our enemies aren't China or Russia. Our enemies are on Wall Street. Our enemies are in the Pentagon. Our enemies are among the billionaire multinational oligarchy that's running this country and grinding this country into poverty. That's right. We're here to oppose Joe Biden's propaganda show. We are here to say that it's time to fight for jobs, healthcare, and education here in the United States. We need a better country at home, not more wars around the world. We reject Joe Biden's propaganda show. We say he is not an American patriot. He is loyal to the big multinational corporations that have been plundering this country, that have been grinding us into poverty, destroying American jobs and schools. He wants to send more and more money, billions of dollars into Ukraine. Well, America is falling apart. He wants to provoke a confrontation with China in the Taiwan Straits while America is falling apart. We say jobs for America, schools for America, healthcare for America, not a propaganda show, a summit of hypocrisy, a phony democracy summit to spread war propaganda. We're here to oppose it. On the microphone. You have it. Go ahead.
They tell us that all these countries, Russia, Iran, China, Venezuela, are somehow our enemy. But in reality, these countries, I mean, think about China. China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. That doesn't hurt us. That helps us. Their fight is our fight, and this fight did not come to us. But we say, bring it on!
Biden, George Soros, and the globalists, they want war with Russia and China because they are creating an economic alternative to the United States imperialism. Biden and the Democrats and the Republicans are leading us to a nuclear war, which the imperialist powers provoke. They're mobilizing and sending money to Ukrainian Nazis. They're voting to start a third nuclear war with Russia and China. These two parties are driving us towards a new imperialist world war, a war Americans have nothing to gain. They are playing with our lives. They're playing with American lives. The way out is not war, it's peace and development. Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine! Defund Ukraine!
Defund Ukraine! No nuclear war! No nuclear war! No nuclear war! No nuclear war! No
nuclear war! I have 2 kids, and I do not want them to die in a fiery death. I just want them to have beautiful, wonderful education, good schools. We need infrastructure. We need more infrastructure. We need to build up our country. No degrowth. No war in Ukraine. We need to stop all movements toward nuclear war. For my kids, for your kids, for all children on this whole planet.
Joe Biden, you are a hypocrite. Instead of going all over the world trying to impose so-called democracy, how about we have some democracy here in the United States?
That's right.
20 years after our genocidal war against Iraq, not a single war criminal has even gotten so much as a ticket. The only people who have been jailed are the people who exposed the war crimes and exposed the torture. It's time to free all the political prisoners, from the left and from the right. Free all the political prisoners from the 1960s. Free the black revolutionaries. Free the January 6th political prisoners. Free Julian Assange. Drop the charges against Chairman Omali Yeshitela and his friends.
Right. Hands off UHURU!
No political prisoners in the United States. Do not open your mouth to accuse any other nation of being authoritarian until you clean up your own house, Joe Biden. Stop the hypocrisy. We need regime change here in America. Our enemies are not in Tehran or Moscow or Beijing. Our enemies are in Wall Street and the city of London. Russia and China are not our enemies. 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 Democracy here. Democracy here. Democracy here.
Democracy here.
All right, I have a question for you folks. When was the last time Beijing took money out of your paycheck? When was the last time that Moscow sent your child to die in a war? I have a question for you. When was the last time that Tehran put your mom into a hospital and would not allow her to get out of it because you do not have enough money to pay for her health care? I don't know about you, but it is Washington that has imposed that on me. It is Washington that has imposed that on American families for decades. So no, our enemies are not in Tehran. Our enemies are not in Beijing. Our enemies are not in Moscow. Our enemies are not anywhere else on the planet except for sitting right here in Washington, D.C., sitting in the White House, sitting in the Congress buildings, warring across the planet for conquest. They are the ones taxing you.
They are the ones causing every issue in your life. Have you ever been attacked by someone from Beijing? Have you ever been attacked by someone from Moscow? Have you ever been attacked by someone from Tehran? Have you ever been attacked by someone from any country that the United States brutally tears apart on a yearly basis? How many drone strikes can make up for the fact that the U.S. isn't making enough money? How many times can we rip countries apart and call it democracy? I don't see democracy in Libya, where we ripped their leader out of power, murdered him, and there's now open-air slavery. I don't see democracy in Iraq, where they invaded their country, killed millions of people, and occupy it to this day. We occupy huge swaths of Syria, huge swaths of every country on the planet that tries to stand up and build its own position in this world. My question for you is truly, Americans, when was the last time someone from these countries came and took money out of your paycheck or food out of your mouth? They never do that. Joe Biden does that. The rest of the congressmen and everyone else do that on a daily basis, every single year for decades. That's all I have to say.
I love Simon. Impressive young man.
Joe Biden, I just want to know how you
Our
sleep
friend
at
Tyler.
night.
Tyler.
Sending $100 billion of our tax money to the Ukraine when homeless people sleep blocked from your White House.
Get him, Tyler.
Sleep at night. I was raised in a Baptist church, and that is not what Jesus taught me to do. No. Are you a real Catholic, Joe Biden, or a fake Catholic, Joe Biden?
He's a fake Catholic.
What are you? An entire generation of millennials get laughed out of the bank when we try to get a loan for our wife and
He's
our
having a
3
Bill
kids
Hicks rant, man.
because we went to college. And instead of forgiving our debt, you forgive the debt of Silicon Valley Bank. The billionaires get their debts forgiven every time, and the working class get kicked in the face.
That's right.
Yeah, you nailed Jesus Christ to the cross, and you can nail me up as well. But I will go down telling the truth about your hypocrisy. I pray for you, Joe Biden. I pray you find the Lord, and I pray that you wake up tomorrow and take care of your working class.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Right on, Tyler. I don't know if it's Bill Hicks or Sam
How did
Kinison.
this stop? This was a great moment. June 30th, 2019. The leader of People's Korea
There
and
you
the
go.
leader of the United States shook hands. They met, the first president ever to visit the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We had Donald Trump trying to make peace with a country that is still technically at war with the United States. Donald Trump was trying to open the door to peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. There would be hope to bring the troops home from South Korea. There would be hope that there could be denuclearization, that North Korea wouldn't feel threatened anymore, that there could be no more bombs and weapons, and the people of Korea could reunify. And Donald Trump going to People's Korea was sabotaged. It was sabotaged by John Bolton and the neocons, the same forces that got us into Ukraine, the same forces that are escalating and pushing buttons against China and Taiwan on the Taiwan Strait, the same forces that want World War III sabotaged the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. We're here to say, finish what Trump started. We want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We want U.S. leaders and the leaders of People's Korea to sit down. We would like to see trade between the United States and People's Korea. We would like to see those railroads in South Korea that have been built. We'd like to see them in action and see the Korean people trading with each other. We don't want war. We don't want money wasted on international confrontations. And we also don't want a police state. And at the same time that the big bankers who control Joe Biden, the Silicon Valley monopolists and fascists, the same forces that control Joe Biden, are waging a war not just around the world, but against the American people. They are driving our country into poverty. Our trains are derailing. People are breathing in deadly chemicals. The water is not properly purified. Jobs are falling apart. Schools are falling apart. It's a nightmare. They have waged a war against us. And instead of rebuilding America, they're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. That's what they're doing here in the United States. They're trying to move toward a low-wage police state. We saw what happened, what's been revealed about January 6th. That was a setup. We saw that those people were led to do what they did for propaganda purposes. We call for an amnesty. We don't endorse what the people did, but they were enabled to do it and set up to do it by the American government. The FBI, the Secret Service, other agencies enabled what happened on January 6th to happen. Those folks were entrapped. And we say that until they're going to be honest with the public about what really happened on January 6th, there needs to be an amnesty for those who've been arrested. And the same goes for the UHURU Movement. A group of black revolutionaries, black activists, had guns pointed in their faces, drones flown into their homes. They were terrorized and accused of being Russian agents. Why? Because they were organizing for the rights of black people, organizing for the rights of their community, providing services that were not available in their community. They're waging a war against us. At the same time, they're waging a war against China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and any country that dares break out of their financial system. And it is our responsibility to oppose it and to join arm in arm with the people of the world against imperialism.
All right, Caleb. Mike checking at the White House. Oh, here she comes. Look out.
To call out U.S. imperialism. President Joe Biden, stop spreading imperialism. It's one of the saying that Russia and China is also imperialist. That is not true. The American government has 1,000 military bases abroad. China is like 1. Russia is like 8. We are the imperialists, not us, not the American people, the American government, the elites. I'm a Filipino-American immigrant. I want to ask Joe Biden to remove the bases in the Philippines.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lie. We're the Filipino people. Those are the Philippines who turned to Ukraine.
That's right.
Yes, over there. China. We're trading with China. That is part of the Asian nation, the Asian continent. Asia for Asians. The American government should focus on this here, the American people. We're suffering. We don't have retirement money. Our students are in debt. They can't buy a home. They can't start a family. We need to focus in America. Let's stop meddling over there. Stop the war in Ukraine. War in China. Let's focus on America. Let's love our people. We love each other. It's about love, Joe Biden. If you love us, focus on us. Spend money on us. Invest on us.
Bring my cousin home from the
Based.
Philippines. Bring the troops home.
No to EFTA. EFTA is the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement that they claim is a temporary military base in the Philippines. And it is a real military base. So no to EFTA. No to EFTA. No to EFTA. No to EFTA. No to EFTA.
No to EFTA.
What was she saying? No to what?
No to ECA, which is the
Oh.
U.S. military bases in the Philippines.
Biden said
Got
that
it. Okay.
billions of dollars to the Nazis in Ukraine and not one penny to the people who he poisoned in East Palestine, Ohio.
That's right.
We need money for water, not for war.
Money for water.
Not for war. Money for water, not for war. Money for water, not for war. Free East Palestine. 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 No more war. No war. No more war. No more war. No more war. No more war. No more.
You know what really strikes me as I watch this video is how many people are just ignoring you. just going on about their day, doing their little touristy thing at the White House and taking selfies and shit. And they're not even listening to you. And this is World War III. And it's amazing how many Americans can't be bothered to even stop and listen to what you have to say.
For those
That's
of you
true.
in the audience, people here who are standing here with flags, we're not all from the same party. We don't all believe in the same thing. Some of us come from the right, some of us come from the left. Why are we here? Because we all agree that we do not want war. We do not want nuclear war going to kill our children. And we also don't want any more war spending, because every dollar that we spend in Ukraine means that there's one less dollar to feed a hungry child. Right now, 1 in 4 children are going to go to bed tonight hungry. How is this possible in one of the wealthiest countries? To tell you why. The reason is they have $7 trillion to give to the bankers, because that's who they care about, but they don't care about us. And if you're really interested in stopping the possibility of war, if you want to stop poverty and the war on the working class, then come over here and join us. Come on over.
Love it.
Yeah, let's march out.
I love that you guys did this. Thank you. Thank you for being there for me, because I couldn't travel to DC.
Yeah, you'll be there next time, I'm sure.
Yes,
You'll be there
you were
next
my
time.
voice. And you might be communists, but I agree with you, and you spoke for me that day. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, that was our little
cool.
intervention at the White House. So we just got the footage
Nice job.
together. So I thought that would be a great addition to your program. So
Nice job,
Great.
guys. That was beautiful. And it's one of those things I love about CPI is you guys don't mess around. I mean, you do stuff. You
Yes.
organize, you do real direct action like that, and you do it on a regular basis. You don't just sit around and bitch about the government. You take action. I love that. Before we go, Caleb, I had one last
Sure.
question. It's just
Go ahead.
kind of a funny thing. It's something
Yeah.
I've always admired about you, and it's something about many of the folks in CPI, especially the gentlemen. I noticed that you guys wear suits and ties. You don't show up in regular street clothes. You dress up like the activists of the days of old who, really dressed to impress. And I was wondering if you'd tell me why you do that, why that's important to you.
Well, over the years, it was something I came to the conclusion that one should do. There's this whole hippie aesthetic, right? You want to look like you're a hippie and all of that, but you
Like
hear
just
stories.
rolled out of bed. Yeah.
You hear stories over the years. I heard one anecdote that was told to me that among people of color, there's a joke, and they say, "How can you tell how rich a white person is?" And it's how badly they dress. And then I heard another story about how socialist and communist groups during the 1970s tended to have people who went to Harvard and Yale in them, but they would all wear torn up flannels and all that to prove how working class they were.
Right.
And it was just kind of gross. And that especially like on Saturday night, they would go and sell their newspaper in, the areas in Cleveland and other major cities where the bars were, where people would dress up and go out with their partner on Saturday night. And these college kids, when they're grimy, ripped up flannels to prove they're part of the working class, would be trying to sell newspapers to working class people wearing their nicest clothes ever because they're going out on Saturday night. And they would look at them and think, "Who are you? Get away from me." And that the other thing that someone pointed out is that all the major unions in this country, the SEIU and the AFL-CIO and all of that, when they send a new organizer to a factory, they always have him wear a suit and tie. Why is that? Because they want him to look professional. And if you're in your neighborhood in the United States and someone knocks on your door and says, "I'm running for city council and I'd like your vote," they're generally wearing a suit and tie. And, that to show that you take something seriously, it's kind of a respect issue. You know what I mean? You want to show that you take this seriously, that you respect the people that you're appealing to, and that you aspire. The politicians on TV, they're awful. Joe Biden's awful. Trump is awful or whatever, but they wear suits and ties. And by wearing a suit and tie, you're communicating to the people watching you and listening to you that on some level, you at least aspire to be in the big league with the big dogs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of leftist politics, when it really gets down to it, they don't have that aspiration. They're just kind of doing this edgy performance art, trying to prove how cool they are, how radical they are. Well, I tell people that that we want to communicate to people that we do have aspirations to be serious political figures at some point. There's a communist group in Canada, one of the smaller communist groups in Canada. One of the slogans that they would always put out, I guess in the 70s and 80s, they said, we need worker politicians, and be like a hyphen, worker dash politicians. I like that. I like the concept of a worker politician. So that's why we dress that way. So there you go.
I love it, Caleb. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Always
And thanks
a pleasure
for having
to
me
have
on.
you.
Best wishes
Caleb.
to both of you, and talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks,
All
brother.
right. Take
Have a
care.
good night. Well, he looks good in a suit and tie, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what my nickname was when I was working in mainstream media?
Mr. Fancy Shirt?
No.
No?
No.
What,
they
were you
called
the
me-
slob of the office?
No, they called me Necktie because I
Oh.
always wore a tie.
I've
and-
never seen you wear a tie. Of course, you don't have to anymore.
That's right. I
free.
always wore kind of unusual ties.
Oh, you were the cool tie guy.
I would wear a tie with like something little different on it. Like I had a Bugs Bunny tie.
Of
But
course.
when you look at it on camera, it looks professional. But down at the bottom, it'd be like a little Bugs Bunny.
Oh, they couldn't
or-
see the Bugs Bunny on camera, huh?
Right. Or I'd
Oh,
have like with
darn.
wine labels, right? But you really have to look at it closely. So they
Cool.
don't. I had a nickname, Necktie. But it was also because I was pretty stiff. I was pretty straight laced. I wasn't. I was. But anyway, you don't need.
Are
to
you
know.
ever going to show us like some highlights from your years at CTV? I would love to see that someday. Like if you pulled some old Walker's tapes out of the
Probably
archives.
not.
Like
because-
never.
Yeah, ever. You're just going to make fun of my hair. I know.
Of course I will.
My mullet.
You probably had like, yeah, perfect mullet with a lot of hairspray.
Oh my.
Oh,
Working
I'd love
in
to see it.
television, man. It screws with your mind. When I first got into media, I don't know if you went through this or not.
I was
but
never in
I-
television, always
See,
radio.
See, it was all about. I didn't feel when I first got in. I didn't feel like I looked old enough, so I would
Mhm.
try to look older, so I'd look more credible,
Right.
right? And then and I wouldn't wear my glasses. I'm supposed to wear glasses. I rarely ever put them on anymore, but
I found
Um,
another pair, an emergency pair
Good
of
for
glasses.
you. But then I thought, that's going to hold me back if I have to wear glasses. And if you're in the studio, you get reflection off your lenses, and I didn't want to look like too much of a nerd. So
4 eyes.
I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
So I would always leave my glasses off. I was just way too hung up on the aesthetics of it, man, because they just screwing with my mind too much,
Yes.
about all of that crap. And it really, at the end of the day, it only matters what the story is and how well it's told and what the journalism is about. But
you
when
just
you're
summed
young,
up all the reasons I never wanted to be in television
Yeah.
news because it was all about the aesthetics, how you
Yeah.
looked, and not so much the news.
yeah,
I miss
I
the
was way
times
too
when
hung
our
up on
news anchors, it didn't matter what they looked like. I mean, Chet Huntley was not an attractive man, but he was one of the greatest news anchors in American history.
yeah,
Didn't used to matter what you look like, even in TV. And most of those guys came from radio. They'd started out at NBC
Mm-hmm.
radio before there was television.
yeah. Different times back then too, but it was all about being a Ken doll back then, right? You go
It
back to
was,
the
boy.
70s and the 80s, and you look at the way newsrooms were, especially local
Yeah.
newsrooms or regional, and they would hire the guy with the very deep voice and put one hand over his ear, reading the news very, very seriously.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, come on, Rick. Show us some of your old tapes. Come
Not a
on.
chance.
How much do I have to pay you to see those?
Oh my goodness. I've been trying to purge around here. I got rid of a whole bunch of old audition tapes and things that I had here.
You threw them away?
Yeah.
Rick, that's history.
Yeah, I know, but at some point you have to let go.
Maybe I'm just, I don't know. I'm kind of a pack rat. I can't throw anything away. Anything that I ever created, like a song I wrote, anything. If it's something I made, something I did, I save it, right? So I've got air checks from when I first started out in radio news from the Reagan administration. That's how old my ass is. I go back and listen to them or edit them or digitize them once in a while. Been kind of, making sure that those old tapes don't fall apart, right? And transferring them to digital. And I listened to, I sounded like this back then because I was really young and I had a high-pitched voice. And there I was talking about, President Reagan and the Star Wars program and all of these stories that are 40 years old. And God, I feel so old. Matter of fact, I was uploading some stuff the other night from when I was covering the 1988 presidential campaign and Joe Biden being the biggest flop and joke candidate of the race. Right. He was a punchline every morning on the morning show, right? I do the news and bring the election stuff in, and the host and I would banter about what a fool Joe Biden was.
And wasn't the thing that really was the final nail in his coffin that time around, wasn't it like a plagiarism thing?
It was that. It was two scandals. There was the plagiarism scandal where he'd been caught stealing from Bobby Kennedy's speech, and another, I think, a Irish politician. He was caught stealing from them, and he was caught faking his academic record. So he had double scandals.
That's right. Yes.
Just because he can't stop lying. I mean, Joe Biden's always been a pathological liar, and he still lies like a rug.
And he still found his way to the White House.
Isn't that something? Yeah. The guy that could never, win in any presidential contest that he ever entered, never even got past the first or second primary in his entire career.
Now he's there and he doesn't even know it because he's
right.
He made it and he doesn't even realize it.
Oh, Rick, that poll that I'm running about who's your presidential choice for 2024, I think Joe Biden is up to a whopping 2.5%, maybe 3%. He is so beloved. 81 million Americans voted for him. I mean, he's the best president ever.
You know what the mistake is that he made? He campaigned from his basement, and when he won, he came out. Right. And now look what's happened. He went from having the most votes
get back in the basement, Joe.
More support than any president ever to 2%.
2%. And Bobby Kennedy is running away with that poll. It's okay. You guys know the story. A couple of weeks back, I posted a poll on Twitter asking who will you vote for in 2024 if you've made up your mind yet. And they only give you 4 choices in a Twitter poll. So the choices were Biden, Trump, Bobby Kennedy, because they're the front runners, at least according to the polls. And then the 4th category was other or undecided. And a funny thing happened. My polls usually get 5,000-10,000 votes. That poll, Bobby Kennedy was winning it by a mile. He had like 48% to Trump's, I think, 28%. So he's leading Trump by almost 20 points. And they just stopped counting votes, right? We talked about it here on the show. Got to 918 votes. It was a 7-day poll. Voting was open for 5 more days. But it just stopped counting votes. People started sending me screenshots saying, I think I'm number 919, but when I go back and I refresh the page on the poll, my vote is gone. And it still says 918 votes. So it froze up, and thousands more people voted over the next 5 days, but that vote counter never changed from 918 votes. So I thought, maybe Twitter just kind of was broken. Maybe we should just try this again. And I waited until after Bobby Kennedy officially entered the race this week, made his announcement. And I thought, okay, now that people have heard his speech, right? That big, long speech that we carried on the air, 2-hour speech. I was just curious, what do people think about him now? So I ran the poll again after the speech. It's a 7-day poll. It's been up for 3 days, and it's got, let me pull it up here. some 780 votes or so now. Let me see how we're doing. But get this, Kennedy is running away with this one. Now he's doubled his lead by 20 more points. He's at 58.4%. Holy cow. Trump is at 19.8. So he's leading Trump by some 40 points. Yikes. Joe Biden, oh, look, he got up to 5.9%. Okay, Biden is cooking now. He's almost a whopping 6%. And other undecided is about 16% on that poll. And Rick, if you wouldn't mind dropping a link in the chat so that our Maverick family can try to vote. Sure. Hopefully Twitter will count your vote. The poll's been doing strange things today because it froze up again. Some people sent me screenshots this morning saying that their vote wasn't being counted and that the counter was frozen again at like 730 votes. And now I notice it's starting to count votes again. Now we're up to 776 votes. But we need a lot more votes. And I want to make sure that it's a fair poll and that Trump supporters get included too, that Biden supporters get included. I'm not trying to skew this to favor my guy, Bobby Kennedy.
Yes, you are. You love him.
Well, I am happy with the results so far. But I'm really making an effort, to reach out to, especially to Trump voters, because what I see in the fall is a likely matchup between Kennedy and Trump, right? Which would be a hell of an interesting race. I hope that that's what we get in the fall of 2024. And a lot of MAGA people agree with me. They would much rather see Bobby Kennedy as the Democratic nominee than Joe Biden. And I kind of wonder for a minute why, because wouldn't Biden be so much easier to beat for Donald Trump? Are you real sure that Kennedy's going to be an easy one for Donald Trump to beat? I don't know about that. But a MAGA friend today, Rick, you'll love this. A MAGA friend told me that they said, I want Bobby to be the Democratic nominee just so the mainstream media will shill for Trump in the fall. I thought that was pretty damn funny.
I have to say, like, the mainstream media is calling him a long shot, but I think RFK Jr., I can see a path to victory.
Well, they said Trump was a long shot once upon a time.
That's right.
Remember?
I absolutely see a path to victory. You've got him going up against, Biden's, the incumbent, right? So there's an assumption that he's going to be the nominee to some degree, but he's old, getting older. We still have quite a ways to go before we get to a decision on who the nominee will be. And
unpopular too.
Yeah,
by the
that's
looks of that
right.
poll.
And when left up to the people, I think that RFK will run away with the popular support. And so there's going to be serious pressure on Biden. And I think because Biden is the presumed nominee, a lot of people won't run. So some of the more serious opposition that might have come forward won't materialize. That's going to create probably kind of a two-way race between RFK and Biden. And then it's hands down who you're going to pick, as far as I'm concerned, if Biden even makes it that far. So then if he becomes the nominee, you've got one heck of a race on your hands with Trump. But this time around, Trump has baggage. Trump is, I don't think his campaign is as slick and it isn't firing on all the cylinders the way it was the very first time he got elected. It's a different ball game altogether. And because they appeal to voters on a similar plane, because their issues kind of overlap, and I think RFK has more credibility on some of these portfolios. He'll pull some support away from the MAGA movement to him, and he'll still get all the Democrats. And then I see him kind of walking away with it if it gets that far. So that's the path to victory that I sort of see. I mean, honestly, as passionate as those MAGA people are for Trump, there's a certain religion almost behind the MAGA movement, right?
Yeah.
But that will get eroded with RFK.
I think he's winning a lot of Trump people over.
Yeah, I think he's the only candidate that can do that.
Oh, certainly. No Democrat's going to have any luck with the MAGA movement because Democrats are too busy demonizing Trump supporters, all the way back to the days of Hillary Clinton, calling them deplorable.
And remember when we talked about Tulsi Gabbard as a running mate? If you combine those two, it's a no lose ticket as far as I'm concerned.
Damn, that's my dream ticket, Rick. Could I dare to dream such things?
That is a winner, man.
But then Tulsi'd have to go back to the Democratic Party after she made this big show of leaving and Dem exit and all that.
Yeah.
How humiliating would it be to go back to the Democratic Party?
Maybe not so humiliating because, you've got a guy in there who's really kind of sort of trying to reclaim the party, or in his words, save it. Right.
And she could rebrand herself as a Kennedy Democrat because she really always was a Kennedy Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Tulsi's a big fan of JFK.
So
big fan of the Kennedys. She's a Kennedy Democrat.
No shame in that. No losing face. Not for that.
I don't think so. I don't know how she'd feel about it, but I don't see any shame in that game whatsoever. And I think she'd be the perfect complement to Bobby Kennedy. And she's still so young and got the rest of her career ahead of her in politics. I've always seen a very bright future for her. If she were vice president, she'd be a shoo-in for the White House next time.
Yeah. 8 years later, then she's prez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the sound of that.
Wouldn't that be
Well, I've always wanted a female president. I'm a woman, but I didn't want it to be Hillary Clinton. And I sure as hell don't want it to be Kamala Harris. But Tulsi Gabbard, I'd be real happy if she was the first female president of the United States.
She's just so level-headed,
Yeah. And uniquely qualified because of all of her military experience, her congressional experience. She's got experience in she ticks all the right boxes in terms of experience. In that sense, arguably she should be at the top of the ticket with Kennedy because she's got a lot more experience at these things than even he does. He's never held elected office, never served in the military, but you put that combined experience together, that's a really strong ticket. Strong president and vice president. I see a strong administration.
And I would sleep better at night because I wouldn't be so worried about dying in a fiery nuclear inferno in my sleep.
Yes. Yes. And even if she doesn't run as the vice president, if she doesn't want to forge a political alliance or come back to the Democratic Party, I'm sure she'll play some kind of a role, an important role in a Kennedy administration. Secretary of State, maybe Secretary of Defense. I think Tulsi'd be a terrific Secretary of Defense. So would Scott Ritter.
Well, now that would be something.
I'm just going to throw that out there. If Bobby's listening, please consider that. But I'm sure she'll have some role to play.
Politically, though, you couldn't go wrong with Tulsi Gabbard. She checks all the boxes.
In whatever job she wants, she can have it. Tulsi, you're hired,
Yeah.
I don't make hiring decisions for the campaign, by the way, but
a good friend of mine she's been a MAGA person, or was, especially in the early going. And when she was listening to Tulsi Gabbard speak, when she was, running to get the Democratic nomination to run for president, my friend said, she's confusing me. She's confusing me. I don't understand. Good way. Yeah, it's like she's a Democrat, though, right?
She can't be a Democrat. She was like the last sane Democrat, and that's why she had to leave that damn party because they're all nuts.
Yeah,
it's the biggest concern. That is that your chair?
It is this chair. It keeps on a little hook thing. Every once in a while, just lets go, and then I like. And then people are like, "Are you okay?" in the chat.
Just gonna see 2 feet sticking up here.
That's right. Little entertainment.
For those of you out there listening, going, what the hell was that on the podcast? I can't see. Is he all right? Yeah, he's okay. I forgot what I was going to say. What the hell was I going to say? Oh, my only real complaint is that Bobby's running as a Democrat. I get it. I understand why he feels he needs to do that, why it might be good strategy. Jury's still out on that one with me, but I respect his choice. I'm going to support him as a Democrat. Wish him all the best of luck. But I'm already looking forward to after the convention, because if things don't go as planned, they're going to Bernie him at the convention. They're going to hand him his hat. And then what happens? Because that's the moment he's going to show us what he's really made of. Is he going to be a Bernie Sanders? And like all the others, the failed candidates who just did the thing and endorsed the nominee, because that's the party rules. You must endorse the nominee. You don't have a choice. So is he going to do that? Is he going to, Joe Biden's an old family friend of the Kennedys, so you would expect him to fall in line, be a good Democrat, and endorse Joe Biden and go out and campaign for Joe Biden in the fall. Now, if Bobby does that, he's going to lose me. I'm not a partisan. I'm not a Democrat. I haven't been a Democrat in 27 years. I'm only going to vote Democrat this one time for him. There's no way that I could support that. So I hope, and I know I'm not alone, because I heard Kim Iverson say this the other day on her show, and I know some others out there agree with me, that if in fact the DNC screws him over, I hope he just says, well, then to heck with you, and he does what Tulsi did, leaves that damn party and does one of two things: strikes out as an independent and runs independent, maybe with Tulsi Gabbard, right? Then they could run together.
Wow.
That would be powerful.
To win with that would be like a first, and I can see that being possible.
Yeah, I can too, especially if it's Biden versus Trump. There's a big wide lane right there in the middle that Americans want. 60% or better of Americans are crying for an independent choice. So I hope that he would consider that to keep his integrity intact. He's going to lose all respect from so many people if he just endorses Joe Biden and goes out and campaigns for him in the fall. The other option is what Roger Stone has in mind, and that's to team up with Trump, join the Republican Party, and be Trump's VP. What do you think of that idea?
I don't see that happening.
Do you think that Trump wouldn't offer, or Bobby wouldn't accept?
I don't think either. I don't think it would. Both. I just don't see either one of them entertaining it, and I don't think
incompatible.
I don't think they would work well together.
I think that's a great observation, Rick. Yeah, you know people, and they're just very different types of people. Yeah, they seem like oil and water to me.
Yeah, he wouldn't just be Trump's yes man. He just couldn't do it.
Exactly. Trump does like yes men.
Yeah,
and that's not Bobby.
Right.
Yeah, and Trump doesn't like to be challenged either. What would he do? Fire his vice president one day? He doesn't like something that Bobby says, you're fired.
Yeah,
Trump would probably do that.
See, I don't think I couldn't work for Donald Trump. I'd be there for like a day, and then I'd be like, F you.
Right.
You don't talk to me like that.
I'd split after he screwed me on my paycheck. You know, he's got a habit of not paying people.
I liked you until I worked for you.
Yeah.
Now I can't stand you.
You really are as awful as they said.
It's always different. The relationship always changes when you go to work for somebody.
No kidding. Yeah,
I've
it's
been there.
ruining some good friendships
Yes, it certainly has.
and family,
Yes.
and family relationships too. Never work for your family.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that can get ugly.
Yep. I've had that happen a couple of times, where I've gone to work for people that I shouldn't have gone to work for because
Yeah.
Same with like business partners, right? You have
Yes.
to be careful about that stuff too. You want to ruin
True,
a friendship? Go into business together.
That's kind of the cool thing, though, about you and me, Walker. We get along. We're friends. We work together.
That's
It seems to work out well. We haven't had a knockdown drag out yet.
No, not really.
Want me to start
I
one?
am exaggerating because like a friend of mine who I was in business with, he stopped by here the other day. We're still good friends. So I
After
am
the pandemic,
exaggerating.
maybe some of those broken friendships can finally mend.
Yeah.
People that we lost during the pandemic over this stupid argument about COVID, about
Oh,
masks, about vaccines, about all of these issues that have been used to divide us. I hope now that COVID is calming down that we can heal those relationships. I don't know if you've had any luck with that yet. But it seems like the other side, the pro-vaccine, pro-mask people, now they're pretending it never happened. They're just like, oh, everything's back to normal. Hi, good to see you.
Right.
Look, Ma, no mask. And they don't mention it and they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
They just want to move on. They don't want to revisit that.
Yeah, I have to. I go to a place of business. I won't say where because I don't want the person to know I'm talking about them. But this lady, and I go in there, and she's behind the counter, and she was like all in on the masks, and I'm so glad now that I just kept my mouth shut. And a couple of times, because like I'd go in, I didn't have a mask on. And
did she give you a hard time?
Wearing a mask today? You're not wearing a mask? I'm like, no, I'm not. Nope. But I never engaged, right? And she wouldn't really engage with me, but I knew she was steaming, and that made me steam. And then I was like, okay, just shut up. And I'm glad that I did because we've been friends for a long time, and now things are just very much back to normal. And even then, we were still friendly, but it was a wedge issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny how the people who were all pro-mask, all of a sudden, I mean, COVID's still around, but now they just don't worry about it and go without a mask like you did all along. But they're not about to admit that you might have been right and that they might have been wrong.
You know what? I went to the grocery store today. And the reason I went to the grocery store I went to is because that grocery store honored mask exemptions, which were written right into the laws here.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to honor it. It was one of the very
It was
few
rare
places,
in Canada that they
yes,
did. Yes.
Very hard to find a place that honored the mask exemptions. And so that's where I still go now. I will shop there consistently, and I have been because of what they did during the lockdowns.
Exactly. Those are the businesses that we should be giving our support to.
That's right.
Those who did defy the stupid so-called science that wasn't based on science at all.
Yeah. And there are businesses that there are businesses I will never, ever, ever go into again as long as I live.
Right. Me too. If they were really Nazi about the masks, no.
Sorry.
They never respected personal choice. Why would I want to give them my business?
Exactly right.
I'm too libertarian for that.
Yeah.
I'm that libertarian.
That's where I'm at with that, man. And I'm pretty strict about it. Even, some of the big box stores I have to go into once in a while, but I don't give them my preference. They're like last choice. If I can go someplace else, I'll go there first, including the Walmart, here in town, because they were all in on the masks too.
Oh yeah. Walmart still makes their employees wear masks, even outdoors. Like when you go do the grocery pickup.
Yeah.
They still have to wear masks outdoors.
Because I wasn't good enough to be allowed to go into their store. Back then, I had to go for curbside pickup, right?
Yes. Yep.
Like, okay, well, now you want me back? Well, I've got issues.
Speaking of issues, I've got one more thing to say, and then I have to hop off for the night. But
Sure.
I wanted to compliment you on the interview you did yesterday with Paul Hartman.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Damn, that was good. That was so great. I always loved the Hartmans, the Hartman brothers. Didn't know much about Paul. Of course, knew about John. I guess he was the oldest brother, and Phil. I loved Phil, and it was really cool to hear his stories. Nice to see Mouth of the South. You know, I guess they're old friends, right? They kind of know each other, or
Yeah.
through the 420 movement. And I know you probably couldn't ask him about this because you were on YouTube yesterday, but after Phil Hartman died and Bryn killed herself, the family of the executors of the estate, I think it was both sides of the family, brought a lawsuit against Pfizer.
Yeah.
Because Pfizer was the maker of that drug, Zoloft.
Yep.
And remember, this was 1998. Not much was known about Zoloft back then. We didn't know yet. You know, still a pretty experimental drug.
Yeah.
Sound familiar? It was an experimental drug that we really didn't understand what the effects would be, say, if mixed with alcohol. Because I think Bryn had a couple of drinks that night. Not a lot, but just a couple of drinks mixed with Zoloft can make you go, woohoo. I've always believed that Zoloft killed Phil Hartman, and killed Bryn Hartman too. I think that drug bore a lot of the blame. So they did sue Pfizer unsuccessfully about a year later in a wrongful death action.
I was aware of it, and you know, I pushed over into that zone, and he just chose not to.
Oh, did
go
you?
there.
I may have stepped out of the room. I missed that part.
Yeah.
I
I started to talk about that, and so I left it open for him. But because of the sensitive nature, right? And it isn't like it's new information that I was going to be, you know,
very old information,
revealing the newest information on this, you know, developing story. No, I mean, there's a lot of history,
you know, people
there.
sort of remember if you were around 25 years ago, and I mean, that was a long damn time ago. But I remember that case, and at the time, I hardly even knew who Pfizer was. But Pfizer's become a household word in the last 3 years. Everybody knows who Pfizer is now, right?
That's right.
And so that was just one of those little interesting side roads of that story yesterday. I just wanted to remind people that the drug involved that may have made Bryn Hartman lose her mind that night and do what she did was made by Pfizer.
Well, I know that there is, you know, a lot of controversy surrounding that. I know that there is research being done. People have been looking at the statistics surrounding the use of antidepressants like Zoloft and shootings, especially with you know, younger people.
And another thing that happened that same year, like they were just a month apart, was the Columbine shooting, right? Or was that 98 or 99? Columbine.
I'm not sure.
Those kids were also on Zoloft. And it was only then, after the Hartman incident and the Columbine incident, that we finally started to have a bit of a national conversation about the potential, you know, psychosomatic effects of these drugs that could make people suicidal, could make them homicidal. But no, there was hardly no discussion about it back then.
Yeah.
And
I
the
mean,
courts didn't want to hear it.
For legal purposes here, we have to say that we're speculating. We're not drawing conclusions and saying that Pfizer is absolutely responsible for these things. But there's been a lot of discussion around it.
A lot of anecdotal evidence. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
You know, a lot of stories out there, and it does stand to reason in a lot of these cases. But back then, the courts were not willing to award the family any damages. I don't recall how that case settled, if it was settled out of court or if it was dropped or what the ultimate resolution was. I couldn't find anything on how it was resolved yesterday. Got me curious, you know. I went back to the archives and went, It was the Pfizer angle that got me curious about
Yeah.
the whole thing. Then once I
Yeah.
realized, oh yes, I was like, who made Zoloft? And then it hit me. Oh, Pfizer made Zoloft. Still
right.
does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still some litigation out there surrounding all of that with Pfizer, as I understand it. So it's an ongoing issue for sure.
Right. And when he was talking about the time he served in prison, I think he got a 6-year sentence, served half of that.
Yeah.
And I thought, for nonviolent marijuana offense, right? And I thought to myself of all the people like him who back in the day did long prison sentences, even though they were nonviolent criminals who were growing marijuana. And I think of all the big pharma executives who still walk free and are allowed to make billions of dollars and have probably got the blood of millions on their hands. Just doesn't
That
seem
reminds
right.
me of Mark Emery, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was has been a big marijuana activist over the years. He was in my hometown where I grew up and where I went to journalism school and so on. And I went down to his used bookstore at one point to interview him because he had been arrested and he spent a little bit of time in jail at that point. And I interviewed him, and it was, even that was chilling for me because he told me on camera at the time about his experience of having to use the toilet like out in the open with all the other people in the jail, right? And he said he didn't think he could ever do it, but he did. And I thought, I never want to have to go to jail ever. No.
If you weren't already risk averse, right? You're pretty
That's
risk
right. No,
averse.
that's it. No, I'm going to be good.
You're going to be a really good boy after
Yep.
that.
I'm never going to do that.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I've never been to jail, not for lack of trying, by the way. I mean, I've definitely done some dumb things that probably should have landed me in jail, but I was just one of the lucky ones who didn't get caught. But
Well, here's the irony. Okay, I've been very straight and narrow. I covered the Queen. I had to do all the security checks and all that, and everything.
Got to be clean as the whistle,
color, right? I crossed the border one time with anyway, and they confiscated my phone. They gave me like the full
Third
search,
degree.
right? And they were like, okay, this guy's clean. I mean, it's like, if you want to know if I'm a bad guy, just know I'm very clean until now, because now I'm on here with, communists and socialists and libertarians and
Russians.
And now we're talking about the UHURU Movement. And
we're all going to jail, man.
Yeah, if I cross the border now, boy, I'm going to jail just because of this. And I have to tell you something, you better be careful too, because you're talking to me. And now you're in deep trouble.
I keep bad company. Man, I do. I've got some dangerous friends. We're all going to prison. It's just a matter of time. I hope they can build enough prisons for all of us, because I want to be, in the same cell block as you. We could do Maverick News from prison.
Well, just we just need like adjacent cells, so like through the bars we can play cards or something.
I can't believe we're laughing about this.
Yeah, I know. To be quite honest, I'm actually worried about crossing the border now that we've done this show tonight.
Well, I don't blame you. I'm worried about trying to fly anywhere or to try and leave the country. What's going to happen next time I travel? After the, really, edgy journalism I've done over the past year, I've pissed off all the right people. I'm probably on every national security list. Are they even going to let me get on a plane? Can I go see my grandma in Dallas? Or am I going to have to drive? I mean,
I don't know.
I'm probably on some no-fly list. I haven't tried because I like flying, but I hate flying commercial with all the crazy people. And the little kids and the guy next to you with the smelly feet who kicks his shoes off and props his feet up on the seat back. So many reasons I hate flying. Get me in a private aircraft and I'm happy. Some little puddle jumper. I love flying in those things.
Yeah.
But no, I hate flying commercial.
I just watched Top Gun Maverick for the first time 2 nights ago. Have you seen that yet?
First time?
Yeah,
Oh, the new one.
The new one.
Okay, I thought you were saying, how could you have missed
no.
Top Gun? Are you the last guy on Earth? You're the Maverick guy.
Yeah.
No, I haven't actually seen the sequel.
Oh.
What did you think of it?
It was okay. Not as good as everyone was saying. I thought the
Yeah.
script was a little bit formulaic.
Hmm.
It was just kind of like, okay, they just kind of tie everything together, but really the script, it was like predictable,
Hmm.
totally predictable. The flying sequences were
I'm
good,
sure those were cool.
really good, you know. So great cinematography, but not as good as I was expecting it to be. It was a bit of a cliche, but you know what? That works. That's why it was what it was. That's why it works. So I have to just kind of go, well, okay, it was just entertainment. And
Which, maybe
propaganda.
is kind of nice. If it wasn't woke, it wasn't pushing some agenda on you. It was just a great
Yeah.
way to spend a couple hours and be entertained.
Yeah. And you know
Nothing
what? It
wrong
had
with
like the one female fighter pilot. I thought when I first saw the movie come out in the trailers, I thought they had several, like almost half of them were like, but no, it was only one. And I thought, well, I guess that's sort of representative of what's going on in the military right now. So I
Right.
guess I could appreciate it because it was demographically probably realistic. And so I appreciated that. They weren't trying to push it too far.
Yeah.
Remember the old series Battlestar Galactica from
Yeah,
the
sure, I
80s?
do. Yeah.
And see even there back then, they got that whole squadron of female Viper pilots, right? I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember that. But
Yes.
that was back in the 70s. And then
And
Richard
even-
Hatch,
yeah.
Richard Hatch, there
Mm.
was the episode where his wife, played by, what was her name? Suzanne, was it Suzanne?
Plachette?
Plachette?
Suzanne Plachette?
I
Oh, I
think
loved
so.
her.
Yeah, she was
Loved
great.
her.
And they had the whole conversation about it was like my mom and my dad back in the 70s. My mom wanted to go to work, and my dad was like, "I don't want you to go to work. I'm the man of the house." And then my mom ended up going and getting a job, and she worked, and then my mom worked there for about a year, and it just reminded me of that whole. And she said, "So do you want me to quit?" And my dad said, "No, never," because everything was working out great. So he changed his
Right?
mind. Right. So, but it reminded me so much of that episode of Battlestar Galactica. But even
That's
back
funny.
then, like they were really trying to, like, there was that back then. There were no fighter pilots in the military, so absolutely
Right.
social engineering back then. Which, as a kid, it didn't bother me at all. It was pretty woke for the time, but didn't bother me. I just
the
appreciated that they didn't push it.
original Top Gun, was it 1986 when the first Top Gun came out?
Yeah.
The Kelly Gillis character.
Right.
If you remember back then, I mean, women were starting to, make some waves in the military, but still, that was pretty big deal at the time. It was a big women's empowerment
That's
issue
right.
that
Because
she was such an important
she was
character.
like a consultant.
She was the
instructor,
boss.
Kelly
Yeah.
McGillis. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess today they would consider that woke, but at the time it seemed like a great leap forward for us women. I remember looking up to her character at the time. I think I was just starting my first year of college, and her character made me feel like, see, anything's possible for us girls, right? We can do whatever we want. The sky's the limit, literally.
Yeah.
Then we hit the glass ceiling, and it's like, oh, no, you can't.
But they fought an enemy that they never actually identified, so you don't know what country it was that they were fighting with.
Right.
So I'm not sure why. Probably just to give it shelf life. If they had picked a particular country as an enemy, it might have dated it, right? And
Yeah.
and given that that movie's release was delayed, it's probably best that they didn't do that anyway. Plus, it'll age better without that, I suppose.
Yeah, it's timeless now. I mean, it still has kind of a Cold War feel to it when you go back and you watch the original Maverick, Top Gun. But
made me feel really old because they
I bet it did.
they in the movie, and it's not a spoiler alert because everybody's seen it already, but Tom Cruise and his sidekick, they end up stealing an F-14 Tomcat from the enemy.
Oh,
and they're like,
Love
this
it.
thing is so old, and it's like these are the jets that they flew in the original movie.
30
and
years
then he
ago?
goes up and he's flying this old dilapidated half broken rusty old bucket of bolts F-14, and he goes up against a 5th generation warfare fighter jet, right, with all the bells and whistles that can blow away the most modern jets, 10-1, and of course the line is, it's not the plane, it's the pilot.
Of course.
Don't think, just do.
Watch what I can do with this old bucket of bolts.
That's
Watch
right.
me.
And he survives, and the two of those 5th generation fighters taken out.
Awesome.
Yeah,
He's like,
with an
hold my
F-14
beer. Let me show you what I can
that's
do with this old
right.
F-14.
This old bucket
Hold
of
my beer and
bolts.
watch this.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was pretty cool.
I need to see that movie, and the folks who have seen it, they told me, okay, yeah, it's not as good as the original. I mean, how do you top Top Gun? But they said that what they liked about it was that it was, for a change, something kind of wholesome, something kind of all American coming out of Hollywood, without a particular woke agenda or a political agenda that they were trying to push on you. That it was just good entertainment, and that in itself was the refreshing part. That was the best part.
You know what it was? They started making that movie when Trump was still in office.
That's right. And then COVID happened, right? And shut it down.
Yeah. So I think that's partly what it was about. It was it was supposed to be, that rekindling of the Reagan-esque American spirit.
That's it. Make America great again.
That's right. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Partly.
And then the movie didn't come out until after Trump was out of office. Yeah. Because of the COVID pandemic. It probably, I think it was supposed to be out in at least a year earlier.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened and shut the whole world down. And
Well,
ironically, Trump did that.
As Rush Limbaugh said several times, I heard him say, imagine what this presidency could have been. Referring to Donald Trump when Rush was still alive. And I would listen to him on the radio from time to time. And I mean, he was right, because the Democrats were just so relentless with their attacks. The lawfare, the Russia, all of the spying, all of the crap, And he said, imagine what this presidency could have been if they had embraced that pro-American, pro-peace, pro-growth agenda. If he had been allowed to just pursue that and just restore the economy and work on all of those things and give people back that American pride that they had back when Reagan was president, it could have been a much for maybe for real, maybe a facade, maybe an illusion, but sure would have made people feel better.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe it was an illusion. We lived through the Reagan years, and as an American growing up in those times, it was hard not to feel the patriotism in the air. And everybody flew an American flag and had an American bumper sticker on their car, American T-shirts, and Bruce Springsteen's "Born in the USA" blaring out of every stereo. It was a great time to be an American. I still think of it as our last great decade. Right. And when Trump said he wanted to make America great again, I thought he wanted to rewind, back to about the 80s.
Yep.
If we were going to set the clock back, let's set the Back to the Future mobile to 1985.
Of
course. Pretty good year.
Yeah. Of course. Me too. And of course, Donald Trump wants to go back to that era because he was flying high. I think that was when he was at his peak, really.
Yep. The 80s. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's when he was the hottest thing going.
And I watch videos of him from the 80s, and he was sharper. Like he was sharp.
He was impressive back then.
Yeah.
That's why everybody was bugging him to run for president. Even then, I think Roger Stone started trying to talk him into it back around 1988. I think he wanted him to challenge Vice President Bush. And Trump wasn't ready, but he was 35. He was old enough to, and Roger Stone, even then, Roger Stone was trying to get him to run. And Trump, really, I think he was really trying to bring back that Reagan-esque era. And I went to Trump rallies, and it was the closest thing I could feel again, like stepping in that time machine and going back to the Reagan era. And it was nice. Just so much patriotism, love of country, nice people, wholesome, family-friendly gatherings. Trump rallies are. They're really a lot of fun. I enjoyed them very much in the 2016 year. I didn't attend any in 2020 because I was too sick. I had long COVID and couldn't go. But, he tried really hard to bring that back, and yet it didn't happen in the way that it did in the Reagan era. And I think the reason is because Reagan never had the kind of opposition, fierce, violent, angry opposition that Trump had. Our country just wasn't that divided under Ronald Reagan, and he always won by a pretty good margin. So he was picking up Democrats to vote for him as well in every election. A lot of Democrats liked him. There were Reagan Democrats. Remember them? You didn't hear of too many Trump Democrats, though. That line was a hard line, and it just couldn't be crossed in this deeply partisan, divided society we have now.
As as much as we had serious issues back then, there was not the polarization that we have now. And I would put it out there that there's almost it's not almost, there is like a mania, if not mental illness in some cases.
It's a mental illness. Come on. Trump derangement syndrome. That's a thing.
There's that, but there's also, on the other side too, like there's a mania, in certain departments or areas of the freedom movement, the MAGA movement, that there are people out there that are kind of like a little bit on the fringe. And I don't mean that in the same sense as Trudeau does. I just mean like the QAnon group, like some of those folks, I think they do go down rabbit holes that take them into pretty dark places that maybe aren't that real.
That's what worries me sometimes about Trump, though, especially like the last couple of years. He seems to have gone to, I can't tell if he's trying to placate the Q people and just keep them on board because he needs their votes and their support, or if he really believes some of this stuff from the QAnon movement. But he's always retweeting QAnon accounts on Truth Social. And some of it's kind of wacky. And it makes me question Trump's judgment, because surely you don't believe that stuff, do you? I mean, are you okay, Mr. Trump? That when I see that, it does make me wonder if he's ready for 4 more years or 8 more years holding that kind of power. I mean, I don't have a problem with him believing it as a private citizen. I don't think I'd want a president who's a QAnon person, though.
No.
No,
because the biggest problem is, it's like I get people calling me or sending me messages telling me that Donald Trump is actually still the president, and he's actually even in charge of Canada.
Oh,
And the
I've
problem
heard that
is that
one.
and the problem is that, if he actually believes in all the QAnon stuff, then he thinks he's still the president and in charge of Canada, which is like really a problem.
That would be a major problem. What if he's like delusional and thinks he's king of the world?
And what if he believes that there's more than one of himself?
Yeah.
Like if he believes there are like 3 or 4 or 5 Trumps, how would he even know which one of those is him?
Oh, my head hurts. My head hurts.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. What a rabbit hole. I mean,
Right?
That's a deep rabbit hole, Rick Walker.
Oh.
You-
There
you
are
wonder.
5 of me. I don't know which one I am today. Which Trump do I identify as? Wait a minute, that's woke. I can't go there. What am I going? Right? This is a big problem.
And there's so many different versions of the QAnon story. Like the QAnon people can't even get their own story straight because some of the Q people think that Trump is still the president, and some of them think that he's running Canada too, and that Biden is a body double and he's an actor and it's all a game. And then others tell me that Trump is dead. And that he's
Now,
been dead
see-
for quite some time now.
And for Trump, as a QAnon subscriber, that is a real problem because then he thinks he's dead.
He not only sees dead people, right? He is
He
dead
is
people,
dead
and he's
people.
running for president. Elect the dead guy. Vote for the dead guy in 2024. It can't be any worse than Joe Biden.
And the really scary thing is that this conversation probably is not just a conspiracy. It probably is reality. We're screwed.
Everyone seems to have a different definition of reality these days.
These
That's what
days.
scares me. Is we
Yes.
can't agree on what's real anymore.
Yep. It's true.
That scares the hell out of me. And probably you too, because we both spent our whole lives in the news business where we thought it was our job to inform people every night on the news what's going on.
Yep.
And nobody even believes the news anymore. Not even the independent media, right? If you
I
can't
see.
trust us, who can you trust?
You've seen me on here where this is the reality. This is the reality. I run clips of people saying things that are not very good, bad, sometimes bad things. They say it. I run the clip of them saying it, and then people accuse me of lying about them saying what they said when I showed them saying it.
Yes. I just played it. And they're like, no, he didn't say that. I've had to deal with some of that this week. People that are totally disconnected from reality. In the when Bobby Kennedy made his speech Wednesday and he hit Trump on the lockdowns, right? And he blamed Trump for locking down the country.
Right.
Said it was Trump's bad judgment that he got rolled by Dr. Fauci and he got rolled by these crooks in his administration. And he did. But there were people who were trying to start arguments with me about it online, who I presume are kind of the QAnon wing of the Trump faction. And they were like, that's not true. That's not true. Trump didn't lock down the country. And I'm like, okay, how could anybody's memory be that short? It was only 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago last month. Doesn't everybody remember who was president during the lockdowns of 2020? Who gave the order?
Some people would argue that he left it up to the individual states, but
Well, he did, but he shut down the federal government.
Right. But right. He's still the president. He still had a lot of power and he could have stopped all of that.
Well, basically, when he announced that we were closed for business on March 15th, 2020, he didn't have the power to boss the states around. But when he said we're closed and he explained why, states just did it because the president said so. And I don't know if that was the right thing. And then some of the red states were the first to wake up, like Oklahoma. We were the second state in the country to open back up. We opened up at the end of May 2020 because we had a governor who just said, oh, this is crazy. Let's get back to work. But and by that time, Trump was starting to, reverse course. And he was saying we need to open back up, liberate Michigan, et cetera. But yeah, he did put us there. He put us there.
When I think back, though, even here in Canada, if you're the prime minister or the president or a governor or a
what would you do?
Right. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of screwed, right? Because not conspiracies aside, and let's just say that you're just trying to deal with this as a genuine leader and a real human being. And you're presented with this scenario. And you have all your advisors around you for whatever reason, maybe legitimate or maybe corrupt, but they're, you've got doctors, medical officers of health, the CDC, and they're all saying, lock down, put people in masks, do all this stuff. So you have all these medical professionals advising you to do this. And if it takes somebody with gigantic cojones to stand up to that at that point and say, nope, not going to do it. Not going to do all that stuff. Because if you're wrong and they're right, you're going to get strung up
You'll
because
get
all these
impeached.
people die.
Yep.
All these
And worse.
people would die. So you're in a no-win scenario, right? You're in a no-win scenario.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Trump was damned if he did and damned if he didn't.
They all
Plus, half
were.
the country already hated him anyway. Remember, he was being impeached when the coronavirus pandemic started. Those impeachment hearings started in late January, were ongoing all through February. So he had these two crises going on at the exact same time. Two of the biggest crises of any president's term of office is to be impeached. Then you throw in a worldwide pandemic, some novel virus on top of that. And it's an election year.
Yeah.
I mean, he really had his work cut out for him in 2020. And I feel for him there. I do. I wouldn't want to be the president through those times of crisis. And that's what defines a presidency, though.
That's
right? It is crises. It's not the good times that define a great president. It's the bad times. It's the crisis.
So as much as you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You just better make the right damn decision, period. And there's no forgiveness because you're the president. You just need to get it right. And I don't know that he did. And I
have mixed feelings about that to this day.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were in his shoes and I saw this killer virus coming out of China and out of Europe that was just knocking down perfectly young, healthy people. Remember, that first wave of COVID was so strong and deadly. It was the deadliest wave ever. Now COVID is weakened to the point where it really only affects adversely the immune compromised, the elderly, the people with pre-existing conditions. But that wasn't the case. Back in early 2020, we saw young, healthy doctors dropping dead in the hospitals in Wuhan. This stuff was strong. Now, if I was the president and I saw that coming and all my health advisors, a guy like Fauci who'd been there for 40 years, I'd be like, well, this guy must know what he's talking about, right? I mean, I could have made that same mistake. Anybody could have made that same mistake to take the advice of the people who were supposed to know their business.
Yeah.
Trump was obviously not aware of Fauci's history and some of the really bad things he had done prior to COVID. He did what I think if it had been Biden in office, he would have done the same thing. Of course he would have. He probably locked us down even harder than Trump did. And he would have kept us locked down. But I will give Trump some credit for this. And I really like this. His COVID pandemic response. He did some really great things for the working class, for the poor, for the small businesses that were closed during those lockdowns. Even though he imposed the lockdowns, he gave us more government help and aid and compensation to get through that crisis than Joe Biden probably ever would have if he'd been the president. And he's supposed to be the commie, the socialist who's going to give you all this free stuff. It was Trump who gave you the free stuff during the pandemic. He was further to the left than Joe Biden. It was Trump who gave you the stimulus checks. It was Trump who gave you temporary Medicare, which paid for your COVID treatments, for your testing. If you had to be hospitalized, it paid for all that. I know because I had to go through it. He gave us plus up on food stamps. Joe Biden just repealed that plus up on food stamps. The eviction moratorium, which was later struck down by the Supreme Court on Biden's watch, that was started under Trump. He did the eviction moratorium executive order so that people wouldn't lose their homes or get evicted while they had no income and no job and everything's closed. I mean, what else are you supposed to do? And the, what were they called? The PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Granted, it wasn't perfect. In fact, that was a deeply flawed program, but at least it was an attempt to help somehow. So I have to give him a lot of credit for the good things that he tried to do during that unprecedented crisis. No president in history had ever faced anything like it. And there was no blueprint. There was no instruction manual of what to do. Yep. And as Bobby Kennedy argued the other day in that speech, his argument was maybe we should have done none of the above. You know, he said the founders were well aware. We had the smallpox epidemic back then. We had pandemics back then that were very dangerous, very virulent. And there was no pandemic exception to the Constitution. That's his argument, which is a very libertarian argument, actually.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying from the
beginning. That's what libertarians been saying.
I was like, wait a minute, you guys have these emergency response plans. They're in binders. You just go over to the shelf and pull it off and do that. And that's what you always, and they ignored it. They just ignored that stuff and did this instead. That to me just blew my mind. So
me too.
That's why I really am not as tolerant of the government response overall.
Well, and Canada screwed it up even worse, even worse than we did.
Yes.
You guys locked down hard, and how long was Canada locked down, basically?
Oh, I don't know, man.
It was a year, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Like more than a year? Because you guys were still locked down when the Freedom Convoy was going on, right? They hadn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
That was much longer than we were in the States.
Yeah, it was just because of the convoy, and then
there's
slowly
that convoy.
because of that. That's no question. Yeah.
Totally. That's why I'll always thank you guys for what you did to open the eyes of the world.
Yeah.
That it was time to lift the lockdowns, time to come back down to earth, get back to work, try to get our lives back to some semblance of normal, and without forcing us to take an experimental drug. Period. I won't say any more because we're on YouTube.
Yes.
I got to go anyway. But
yeah.
What a lovely conversation. It's always great to talk with you.
It's a pleasure every time.
Thanks,
you, Lori.
Walker. Happy Sunday. Yeah. Happy Sunday, Mavericks. Enjoy your night. Take care, and I will see you guys very soon.
All right. Great show. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing Caleb back.
Isn't he just awesome?
That was a good show.
He's the best communist I know. Love that guy.
And isn't there some irony in there where we are talking to a communist about trying to make the United States live up to its billing as a free country and honoring free speech?
And when you watch those guys protesting out in front of the White House, I don't know about you, Rick, but I couldn't find one word that they said that I disagreed with.
Yeah. Well,
we may disagree on economics, but everything else, I'm with you guys.
Yes, that's right. Me too. You know what? So
we live in an upside down world. Okay, the communists are the good guys now.
That's weird.
But they tell us the fascists are the good guys and the commies are the bad guys. Yeah. Might just be the other way around. You think?
It appears to be the case. Yes. He's. I enjoy having him here. I like the conversations, and free speech. Just one more thing that we absolutely have, in common. So
it's opposite world. Remember opposite world?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Get back to doing opposite world, Walker.
That's right.
Here we are. We're living in it every single day.
Yes, we are.
So I will say good mornings instead of good night because it's opposite world.
Okay. All right. You have a good one. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Walker. Bye-bye now.
See you. Bye. And that's that. So actually that gets us to 8:34 p.m., folks. So, what I'll do is I'll run a couple of promos here and then, we'll go to the phones, for just a short time tonight. And we haven't done that so much in the last little bit. So stay with me. I'll be right back. I'll run the promo with the number to call and just give me a little bit of time so I can push all the right buttons. Here we go.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975-FREE. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Be a Maverick. Join us.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, folks. So the phone lines are just about ready to go. I'll put the banner up here. It is 1-833-975-3733 to call in. And let me just hang on. Almost there. So it's Sunday night. Is it Sunday? Yes, I believe it is. Yeah. Losing track of time. Losing track of my days. So much going on. Okay, so. There we go. All right. So again, the number 1-833-975-3733. I'll leave that banner up. Everything is ready to go, so you can call in now.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so again, the number 1-833-975-3733. Just a couple of stories that we can touch on here this evening, since we really haven't had much opportunity to talk about the other news. But in Texas, authorities are investigating cases of dead, mutilated cows. 6 mutilated cows were found dead on a number of different properties along a Texas highway spanning 3 counties. This happened during the week. While investigating the death of a 6-year-old cow, 5 other similar incidents were reported along the area near College Station, spanning Madison, Brazos, and Robertson counties. That coming from the Madison County Sheriff's Office. So it's kind of a weird story. The 6-year-old cow was found with a straight, clean cut with apparent precision, according to the authorities, removing the hide around one side of the animal's mouth. The tongue was also removed with no blood spill. Ranchers reported no predators or birds having scavenged the remains, according to the sheriff's office. Kind of a bizarre story, folks. The cows were found in similar conditions, but in 2 instances, additional external organs were taken. This is really weird. Each cow was mutilated in a different location. No signs of a struggle. The grass wasn't even disturbed, and there were no footprints or tire tracks discovered around the area of the mutilated animals. So police say the actual cause of death for all of the 6 cows remains unknown. So it isn't clear if, like, how these animals were killed and then mutilated. We don't know. But that's a real thing. It's absolutely a real thing, and being reported, not just by independent media, but mainstream media as well. Kind of bizarre. So if you'd like to join the conversation tonight, again, 1-833-975-3733. And the phone lines are open. It appears everything is in order. We're ready to go to the phone lines at any time. I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes to kind of get to your phones and get things coming in here. What else can we talk about tonight? I know that if you're in Canada, you're no doubt wondering what's going on with that federal workers' strike. The Public Service Alliance of Canada, the president of the union, says he's hopeful a deal will be struck soon. Negotiations have been ongoing between the government and the federal workers' union leaders. So Chris Aylward, national president of PSAC, is calling on the prime minister himself to get involved in the talks. He says, "We still believe that the prime minister at this point," this is a quote, "should be weighing in because we know that the strike is having an impact on the economy," he said. "Certainly, we're trying to have the least amount of impact on Canadians as possible, but certainly our members, if we don't reach a deal this evening," that would be tonight, "our members are back on the picket lines tomorrow, unfortunately." And that's Monday. Treasury Board President Mona Fortier was on Twitter claiming the federal government had tried to table a counterproposal yesterday, during which time the union held a press conference instead before both parties met. And so it has been, a bit of public jockeying and negotiating in the court of public opinion to some degree. So that's kind of what's going on. It's still up in the air. And a lot of what you're hearing coming from both sides is rhetoric. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in what anyone is saying with regard to where the negotiations are at exactly, because they're trying to apply pressure in various ways by saying whatever they have to say. Keep that in mind. Leverage during the bargaining process, and it is still ongoing, I think, even now tonight. So we'll see. Let's go to our first call of the night. Here's Steve. Hello, Steve. How are you this evening, sir?
I'm very good, Rick. How are you?
I am fine, sir. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, no worries. I guess I probably want to touch on the PSAC strike, I guess.
Sure.
Kind of seems, I'm lost for words on it, but yeah, in my hometown here, there's a military base that's being affected by this strike because a certain number of PSAC workers were deemed non-essential, and they were allowed to strike. But these individuals were in charge of a boiler system which provides heat and hot water to our soldiers.
Yep.
So there's like 700 soldiers here in Petawawa that are without heat and hydro.
Yeah.
And that's a true story.
Yes. Yeah. I had actually forgotten about that, but I was aware. I heard about that a couple of days ago. Yeah.
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 So it's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like a slap in the face again. There's like no respect for our soldiers, or even less for our veterans.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the average person out there, I don't think this federal strike matters. Like, it's not affecting my life at all. I was out today. I didn't see people fretting about it. Like, everybody's just going about their daily life. The federal workers themselves, when they're not on the picket line, they're still collecting strike pay. They're not starving at this point. For the union to sit there and say it's affecting the economy, I'm not so sure about that. I guess there are some portions of it. I mean, the worst thing that the media could point to yesterday was I saw a global news report, and they were worried. They focused attention on people who, like immigrants, were worried that they might not get their paperwork processed, and they were worried about being deported. Well, I can tell you right now, they're not going to deport people because of the federal workers strike and not getting paperwork processed for new Canadians or people who have applied for whatever status through the immigration process. Like, that's not going to happen. Canada's not like that. And secondly, who are you going to get to deport them? All the federal workers are on strike. So I guess the cops might show up, but even then, they're not going to do that. You're going to tell them, well, I'm waiting for the paperwork, and they're all on strike. And they're going to say, okay, don't worry about it. That's my opinion. So I think that's overblown. But the media always focuses on these kinds of labor disputes involving government workers and makes it seem like it's, the most important thing by far. Even when the CBC has gone on strike in this country, in Canada, they always make a huge deal out of any labor dispute with the CBC. But, if it's a labor dispute involving any of the private broadcasters, it's never as important. It's because it's government. Government's always the most important thing, but it really isn't. In fact, in many respects, it's the least important thing, except as it relates to what you just talked about. That's serious for those folks. That's having a direct impact on their well-being and their comfort or lack thereof.
Yeah. And then it just seems like it's all about me. Like for them.
Yeah.
Me. It's like some of them are angry for being forced to go back to work for 2 days a week because since the pandemic hit, they've been working from home.
Yes.
And now some of them are forced to go back to work for they were mandated to go back to work for 2 days out of the work week, and they're losing their minds over this.
Well, I understand why they're looking for a 13.5% pay increase, because I was at the grocery store today, and I swear, so many of the things that I'd been purchasing even just a week ago were double the price. Double.
Rick, I saw steaks at the butcher shop selling for $30. Dude.
Oh my goodness.
Steaks, dude.
Yeah.
$30.
Insane. I
It's insane.
Yeah, I didn't buy them, but I walked by like where they sell hot dogs, like $6. Like even if you used to get those chicken wieners, they used to be like 99 cents. Today, $2.49.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous.
From 99 cents just a short time ago. Like, come on. That's like whoa, that's more than double. So that makes your money worth way less. It means that you were working for half your wage before, right? No, this is no good.
Obviously, like if you're not wealthy or if you're not well off, you can't afford to eat well.
Right.
Who's going to spend $30 on a steak nowadays?
Yeah. Just some of the things were
Like,
just off the chart expensive today. Do you know what a pound of
food?
Have you checked the price of a pound of butter? Like I think it was $6.49 when I was at the the Shoppers Drug Mart pharmacy, right? Drugstore. But that's owned by Loblaws, which is the big grocery store chain. $6.49 for a brick of butter. And they had a big thing full of it.
I was just at a local pizza shop here earlier today. I ordered pizzas for dinner.
Yeah.
And we started talking about the price of cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about it. He buys his cheese in bulk, and he was telling me years ago he was able to purchase pound of cheese for I can't remember the dollars amount, but he basically said it's gone up in the last 10 years 300%.
Yeah.
300%.
Yep.
Price difference on his goods that he needs, right? And then he can't turn around and sell his pizzas for 300% more than what he was. He's forced to take a loss on that.
Yeah.
He could charge a couple of dollars more for his pizza, but it's nowhere near 300%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a continuous loss.
Inevitably, like it or not, those price increases are all filtering through, though. It's coming through. I'm seeing $1. It was I thought it can't go any higher than $1.60, but today I saw gas for $1.61.9 per liter. $1.61.9. And again, there's almost 4 liters in a gallon, 3.78 liters per gallon. So that's almost 4 times that for a gallon of gas, almost. Wow. And that's Canadian dollars. Too much, man. It's too much. And more to come.
We're getting raped.
Yep.
They're stealing from us. We're getting raped blindly, like, and I'm discouraged that people don't, like, my neighbors, my friends, they don't seem to be clued in. They just.
Today at the grocery store, it told me it's plain as day. The stats that they are feeding us are not true. Inflation is much higher than they are telling us. And this is setting off real alarm bells for me. We are in trouble.
Yep. Absolutely 100%.
Mm-hmm. 13. That's why they're asking for 13.5% with the Public Service Alliance of Canada. They want a 13.5% raise.
Well, if they get that, that's got to trickle. That's got to trickle down into the private sector too.
Yep.
All of a sudden, might as well just bring minimum wage up to $35 an hour now.
Yeah.
Because this $15 an hour don't cut shit.
Nope.
It might as well be $3 an hour right now.
Yeah. They wanted $15 an hour. That would be at least a living wage. No, it's not anymore, because now everything is inflated. So that $15 is kind of like you're probably making less at $15 an hour now than you were at the old minimum wage before, which was what? It was like, was it around 10 or 11.50 or something? It depends on the province you're from, right? But
yeah.
oh, for crying out loud.
But you see, the thing is, like, it doesn't seem to in the tax brackets that you fall in, it doesn't seem to translate well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say, for example, like, you know, so somebody who's making 35 grand a year versus somebody who's making 70 grand a year, the inflation doesn't seem to be factored in, because, you know, the person that pays that earns 70 grand a year, he's in a higher tax bracket, so he's paying higher taxes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to match with the current inflation, like daily. Something just does not seem right. It's just like Canada is broken. Let's just say that. It's broken. This country's fucking broken.
True.
That's all.
It's true.
Shit doesn't seem to be making sense anymore. Like, I'm 47 years old now, and I started working. I remember making that $3.25 an hour.
Mm.
And you know, if you were able to save your pennies at $3.25 an hour, you were able to buy a house. You know, if you were careful, you were smart. Now, forget it.
Yep. Well, you know, I was even at the hardware store, and I noticed, like, I wasn't gonna buy any, but there was a display of rust paint. Okay. And Tremclad rust paint spray can. And it was like about $13, like $12.99 or something. And I thought, man, I remember before, like years ago, I would buy that for like $3.99, $4.99 a can. Now they want like $12.99. Wow.
That's like, well, 300% fucking increase right there.
There you go. Yeah, that's not like an overnight price increase, but that's where we're at today. And in my head, I guess I'm still stuck in the 80s, right? Because to me, like, that's a can of spray paint. It's worth like maybe $5. No, $12.99. Yeah, okay. I don't know. Can't afford to live, man. But that's why, I don't know about you, Steve. Like, I don't know how you economize, but I don't really eat out at restaurants anymore. I live extremely frugally. Because of the pandemic, I've really tried to remove myself from society as much as possible. I dip in and out. I'm very independent. I run things on my own. I don't spend much money on anything at all. I just try not to immerse myself in, you know, the daily business activity and the economy. If I don't have to, I dip in, but I dip out, right? I think that's really the long-term solution for all of us. That's my opinion. I see a lot of people who are like, we have to like make a parallel society. And, you know, when the shit hits the fan, I'm running into the bush and I'm going to make a lean-to. No, I think, you know, we need to be able to, I think, dip in, because we need to be able to survive. We can't really completely remove ourselves from the rest of society. I don't see a way to completely do that. Even if you're sort of on a farm or something, and you're trying to grow food and be completely self-sustaining, at some point you still need to connect with the outside world to get some of the resources that you need in order to keep your operation running. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't completely disengage. So you need to come up with creative ways. And I largely have. for myself, and everybody was, I think, is going to be different. But I even watch these prepper shows, and a lot of the suggestions that they come up with just don't seem practical at all to me. Not really. I see things like get yourself a radio and a flashlight, and I'm like, yeah. And they get a bug out bag. Where are you going to bug out to, and for how long? Right? Like, no, man, you need to come up with a better strategy than that, so that you can live and keep what you have, and not suffer, and protect your family and take care of people. My approach is different, I guess. I think people just have these cliched ideas about how you're supposed to prepare and react if there's some sort of an emergency. People always want to run away. And I'm not really of that mind. I'm like, no, I think I'm going to like stay put. I've got everything I need right here. I'm going to be prepared. I have tools and I have resources here. And even in the long run, like if you're talking about the lockdowns and, not being permitted to completely participate in society or whatever, I think the internet actually gives me a way to connect to the outside world without being entirely reliant on the outside world. I look at it different. I think we need to just not be afraid of the technology, just learn to use it and manipulate it so that we maximize our freedom and not allow it to dominate our existence, and not allow it to track us, not allow it to do the things that we don't want it to do. If I go out and I don't want to be tracked, I don't take my cell phone. See what I'm saying? Simple as that.
Yeah, and another thing too is, I think generally we gotta, in these hard times, we really gotta think about just be conservative about your spending.
Yeah.
Instead of buying a $2,000 refrigerator, maybe settle with the $800 one.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Make wiser choices, and definitely we could pay off our credit cards and don't pay interest, and if
Don't go
you
into
can't
debt.
afford to pay for something, don't buy it.
Buy it. That's right.
Stay away from it.
Don't go into debt. You don't need it. Don't buy it. If you don't need to go into,
Exactly.
don't go into
Especially if you
debt.
can't afford it. Yeah.
The debt is the trap. You go there.
Oh yeah.
They've got you, right?
That's right. Yeah, they own you. They own you with that debt.
And once you're in debt like that, you are into the system, and now you're obligated, and they can come after you to repossess, or just different things. So that's where the big trap is. And then you need the job, right? You need the big job to pay for your big debt, and now you're into the whole system. Then that's sort of the trap. You can't disengage at that point, So I don't have a new car. I've got an old car. I fix my car myself. Not everybody can do that, but like there are a lot of things that people can do for themselves. I do as much for myself as I possibly can, so I don't rely on other people. So I'm not indebted to them. I'm trying to be as self-sufficient as I possibly can be, and dip in when I need to, and then pull back out. So yeah, that's kind of what I do, but and the internet allows me to do that too. I use the internet as a tool to maintain my freedom, because I do like website design and stuff like that for clients. So it's that kind of online work that allows me to not have to go and get a big corporate job again, where I'm reliant on that stuff. I make just kind of enough to get by, to sustain myself and what my family has here. So it's just enough. And that's enough for me. I don't need to be super rich or anything, but I don't want to be beholden or indebted to anybody. I want to be independent.
Independent is key.
Yeah.
Independent is key. And thing is, like a lot of independent people out there, they get proposals from the higher ups. Oh, come with us. Come join us. And they'll sell out. they'll sell out.
Yeah.
And it's like, instead of joining somebody like that, just keep doing what you're doing on your own. You know, don't get caught up with somebody who's going to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like if somebody's coming towards you and they like what you're doing and they want to be a part of it or whatever, you got to ask questions. Obviously, they're coming at you. They want a piece of your pie, and you should be smart enough to recognize these people and to stay away from them.
George wants to know if I can fix his car brakes. Yeah, I could fix your car brakes. I could. It's not that hard. It's not difficult. I've done lots of brake jobs. I don't know that I want to, but I could. I fixed my friend's brakes a while back. Yeah. What else is new with you, Steve? What's going on in your life?
Well, me here, I just, I'm in a small town here, and I live my life against the current thing. So anything that I hear on mainstream media, I do the exact opposite.
That's because, like Lori said, we're living in upside down opposite world. Opposite world.
Yeah. And I'm fine, I'm happy. I don't have authorities knocking on my door, Hey, you're doing the wrong thing. No, I'm not doing the wrong thing. I don't bother nobody, I don't yell in anybody's faces. I just I didn't ask to be born. Let's just say, I'm just here. I wasn't born with an instruction manual, and I just keep on living. I earn my own wages. I don't depend on anybody.
Yep.
If I want something, I know that I have to earn it. So I go out and work for it, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
So I always just do that, and it's always just the same story, So when you ask me, what are you up to nowadays? Well, kind of like the same thing I've always been up to the last 40 years. just working.
Just working. Yeah.
Just working. Providing services. I have a list of clients. Who depend on who are dependent on me.
Yep.
For my services, and I render my services to these people, and they're happy, and I'm happy. That's all there is to it.
Simple as that. If you can be self-employed, that's the key to freedom, right? It really is, because then you're not dependent.
That's what I am.
Yeah,
that's what I am. I'm self-employed. So
that is the key right there. Because then you don't have some employer saying, you got to do this or you got to do that to keep your job, or else, blah, 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 right?
Yeah. And for $18 an hour, right?
Right. Yeah. So,
yeah, I work. Exactly. I think I make, on my own, I probably make as much as a doctor makes, probably. I make doctor's wages, and I do this on my own.
Well,
I could never get that from.
Wow. Yeah.
I could never get that from an employer. Doctor's wages from an employer.
Good luck. You know what? It's like this. The other side of the equation is, for me, because I am self-employed and I actually work entirely from home. I do this stuff, of course, every night, but then I've got my business, right? And I do a lot of different things to actually survive. But because I'm self-employed, and because of the way I've got my business set up, my cost of living is like extremely low. I don't travel around too much anymore. I rarely leave here too much, so the point is, I don't eat out very much. I don't have to spend a lot of money on gasoline. I've cut my costs way back, and a penny saved is a penny earned, right? So,
well, you know what? Okay, so I'll touch on this eating out thing.
Yeah.
I'm single. I live alone. I eat out every single day. My fridge is basically empty of food.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you right now, when I talk to other people and they tell me what their grocery bill is every month,
Mm-hmm.
I tell them that I eat for less than what you eat.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Because I can feed myself for less than $20 a day. So that's like no more than $600 a month to feed me. And that's eating out every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day I eat out for it. And I don't go to McDonald's or these fast food joints. No, I go to nice quality restaurants or butcher shops. You know, you pick up a $5 pasta salad from the butcher shop or something like that, you know, real quick. Soups. You can get a soup for like $3 at your local restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Eat it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'll do that. I'll do that throughout the day. And I don't throw food out. There's nothing that goes rotten in my house. I didn't buy anything in excess. So I don't know.
Well, there is that aspect to it. I mean, I eat for a lot less. Because I buy my food and I prepare it all here. I eat for a lot less than that every month. I don't know if I should brag about how cheap I am. I'm not making, money like I used to make when I was working full time, but I don't spend money like I used to spend it either. So it's all relative.
Yeah, it's relevant. So, but it's good to be cheap.
It is.
Millionaires are cheap.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
They're cheap for a reason. The millionaires don't tip, but the welfare will give you a $10 tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's free money. It's like they don't understand the concept of money. They were just handed to it, so they just give it out the same way. But if you earned your money, you're shy to give it out. You know, or if you're gonna tip someone, it's going to be because you were provided exceptional service, and you want to provide gratitude for it.
Yeah.
If you got shitty service, you get 0 tip.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, Steve, it's just after 9 o'clock, and I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up. Do you have any final thoughts for the evening?
Stay free, friends.
Now, those are words to live by. Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Night. Good night, everyone.
All right. Take care. And I like that. I like that. And on that note, I think I will just remind everyone that you can support the channel by donating at maverickdonations.com or at freedomreporters.com. Now more than ever, we need your support. We've been totally demonetized on YouTube. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, hit the notification bell. If you do subscribe on YouTube, please subscribe over on Rumble. That's the free speech platform that we're really gaining traction on. We're getting, pretty good numbers over there. So people are migrating over to Rumble. Please consider subscribing to our channel on Rumble. We're also on Twitch and Getter and Facebook and Twitter, but Rumble's the biggest growing platform and free speech. So appreciate the support as always. Been a pleasure. And as Steve just said, be free, everyone. See you tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.